so what I'm going to do is minimize this and get into my
Good afternoon. We are here today. It is Tuesday, April 27th. We're here for a board workshop. The purpose of the workshop is the superintendent's search process. We did say we would start this meeting at 1 o'clock, so we will start at 1 o'clock. Going forward, we have today with us Ms. McClung and Ms. Stillwell. Ms. McClung has been gracious enough to help us facilitate today's event, and Ms. Stillwell will help us by keeping all the notes and putting it up on the screen so everyone has the ability to participate in this process. So the first thing that, and again, this is here for all of us to have conversation, and we moved it to this day. We had tried several other dates to make this work, and this was the date that we actually had scheduled for all of us to be here. And so this was a date that we knew that people would have to be here, and that's why we wind up choosing this date. So I wanted to give some information of why we are here today. So in beginning the process, and I've never gone through this, so this is all new to me. And as I said, this is for all of us to have participation and conversation. The first thing that we have, that I had written down was regarding Dr. Atkins' contract. He does have a contract with us till June the 30th, which at that time he will be retiring. And so the first thing we have to figure out, do we want him to stay through the 30th to fulfill his contract? And I will ask for consensus, even though some of our other board members are not here. It does start at 1 o'clock. So Ms. Dupree-Bruno, could you please tell me, is that?
The workshop does not require a quorum, so you can move forward with the order of business.
Thank you. Okay, so in saying that, I will take a consensus of the board members that are here, is that we want to allow Dr. Atkins to fulfill his date of June 30th for his retirement. Go ahead, Ms. Gittens. So do we have any, is there any conversation?
I was just going to ask if we could talk.
Yes.
Not if we could talk,
Yes.
you know what I meant, if we could make comments. So I believe that we're in a beautiful position, and please don't take this the wrong way, anyone who was originally born and raised in the South, but I have found significant differences between the speed at which the people who live in the North conduct activities in life and the speed at which people in the South conduct activities in life. And it was a huge change for me when I came down South. Things are a lot slower. And I believe we're in a beautiful position right now to be able to do the two steps of this process deliberatively and intentionally. And that requires time. And Dr. Atkins has given us the time to deliberatively and intentionally choose an interim superintendent. So I would be 100% in favor of Dr. Atkins remaining through the end of his contract.
Thank you. Ms. Fisher?
Yes, so Dr. Atkins has a contract with us that ends June 30th of this year. And I think that since he is retiring, that he should fulfill his contract with us. That's the simplest way of doing it, and it will ensure for us some smooth transition and some assistance with whoever will come in and help us with the search. So I think he should fulfill his contract till June 30th, and so I will be supporting that.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Ms. Morgan?
I agree. I believe Dr. Atkins should stay until his contract expires. And I agree with Ms. Patrica that I think this is a fabulous opportunity for us to put in place a process that will make the community proud and will permit public engagement in the whole process, which is what they want.
Thank you. And Ms. Gittens, we were speaking on the contract. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that.
Right.
Your comments, please.
So, Financially, it would be expedient to have the superintendent stay until June because we wouldn't have to worry about paying out the rest of his contract. One thing that I definitely want to make sure we do, which I feel we already should have done, is to start looking for a replacement and a national search. And the longer we put that off, the harder it's going to be. I mentioned this before from the dais that in the corporate world, when you do announce that you are leaving, decisions and all of that stop. So major decisions are not made at that level once we know that the person is leaving. And I would like to discuss that. I don't see a problem with him working out his contract until June 30th, as long as there are some caveats to it.
Okay. Ms. Giovanelli?
Yes.
Thank you we are on having a conversation regarding Dr. Atkins' retirement and his end date of June 30th.
Okay.
So I would like your opinion on that.
I can wait till I hear everybody else. Thank you.
Everyone else has spoken already.
Okay. Well, I sent my email already. So I think everybody knows where I stand. I think that we could use an interim, but I think Dr. Atkins has the opportunity to be employed and paid through his contract, because that's an obligation that we've made and a commitment. I have no problem with that. I think that we need an immediate interim, and I think we need to form a committee for a national search, and and the board make those selections on who would be on that committee and start that process.
Okay.
I know there's no such thing as an interim, but we would need someone that would establish the process that we have. I mean, we have a lot of business to do, work to do, that the superintendent would need to, we need to keep everything status quo at the schools. I think stability is the most important thing right now, what's in the best interest of our district. But I don't see why we can't have an interim it's very important that interim would not be an applicant for a permanent position. That would be the most important thing for me, is that this district deserves the best qualified candidate, and we don't want to eliminate anyone, and including any immediate staff that may want to apply. And I don't want that position, the interim, to be a permanent position. So, ever how we want to call that, acting superintendent. That is probably the most important, because I want everyone to feel that it's going to be a fair process and everyone has an opportunity. And I don't want anyone excluded in the opportunity to apply and to be the next superintendent of Lee County.
Okay, thank you. And what we're here today to do is to do exactly that, is to go through what the process will be. But at this moment, I had asked if consensus on allowing Dr. Atkins to stay to his end of his retirement, which is June 30th. And we have heard from everyone. Ms. Gittens.
Okay. For some reason in my head, and maybe it's just the way I think, it's almost like the cart before the horse. Until we know the process that we are going to use, whether we are going to have an interim or not, it's like we need to decide that part and not base it on do we want Dr. Atkins to stay. That's a constant. That's something that is there, we know is what's happening right now. But we need to, before we can say, okay, yes, this is definitive, we need to look at what are our options. And the option is to have an interim. So I'm thinking we need to talk about all of that before we would say, because I may make a different decision if everybody votes not, that the interim can stay, the interim can run for the position, the interim can do this, that's going to make a difference in how I decide how I vote.
Well, I guess the reason that I brought that up first, because regardless of if we had decided that Dr. Atkins is permitted to stay until his retirement of June 30th, we will not be able to put a permanent in that amount of time. It's just not going to happen. So we would absolutely have to have an interim regardless of where this goes.
So what I'm saying is, the question is not, does Dr. Greg Atkins stay until the 30th of June? The question is, do we want an interim in this position until we find a permanent person? That's the question, which takes it out of being this individual, but the global question is, Ms. Fisher has it.
Ms. Morgan's
Morgan.
first. Yeah.
So to help process people, if we're to do an interim, today we would have to direct HR to put together an ad. And then we would have to come back and meet to agree on an ad. That could be done a week from now. Then we would have to choose, we would have a time for resumes to come back. We would have to choose candidates to interview. We would have to choose the interim and appoint the interim. We have to do all of that in 2 months, and we can do that. And so from a process point of view, that's what I'm looking at. We can't sit here and pick an interim ourselves because the community doesn't trust us to do it without a process. The community wants to see us lay out a professional plan that will bring in someone who will give us time to do the job the community expects us to do, which is to have a search firm, identify high-quality candidates for the school district. We have a great school district, great reputation, great people. It's not like people don't want to come here, and it's not like some of our staff don't want to step up. But the community needs to see a well-defined, methodical process, and so that's why I say we need an interim. We have 2 months, we don't have 2 months because we'd have to hire an interim by the middle of May. And so I'll put it out there. I'm looking for a 6 to 9 month contract and stipulating, as Ms. Giovanelli said, person who's the interim can't apply for the full-time position.
Thank you, that's exactly what I was saying.
Okay, but prior to
Yeah,
that, what Ms. Morgan just stated, we have to make sure that everybody is okay with
June 30th.
Dr. Atkins is June 30th, because that is his end date for his retirement. So his retirement will begin after that date. So that's why I'm bringing that to the board, so that way we can get that out of the way, so we can begin with the process of what we need to do in bringing that person in and interviewing and everything else that comes along with that. And did you have?
As a follow-up, just so as a follow-up, if you want Atkins to leave before the 30th, I'd like to hear how you expect to bring in an interim. I'd like to hear what the process would be for bringing in an interim if we ask Atkins to leave before his contract is finished.
Thank you, Ms. Work. Ms. Fisher?
So yes, so I think that's step number one. Are we all in agreement? In my mind's eye, I expect him to stay till June 30th because that is his contract, and he did not resign, he did not get fired, and he is retiring. So I think that it's incumbent on us to honor that contract and to take advantage of the opportunity that that presents to us to look at what's the next step. So I'm just going to, if I may, just take 2 minutes to do a little historical perspective. So I've been in this district since 1981, so that's 40 years. And so even before I became a board member 11 years ago, I was kind of a groupie, and I always attended school board meetings and watched what was going on, being from the Northeast and being politically involved. So I think that we need to establish one fact, that first of all, statutorily, there is no such thing as an interim. when a person is sworn in as superintendent, they are the superintendent. The next thing is, our second longest seated superintendent is Greg Atkins. And so he was hired as an interim, and he did a very good job and started with some good strategic planning, Vision 2020. And we decided that because of that, and because of the fact that he had history in the district, we wanted to extend his contract. So he was not, because he was the interim, he was not necessarily unable to apply for the permanent position. As a matter of fact, the board invited him to extend his contract. So that's one thing I wanted to say. In my long tenure in this district, we have done multiple national searches. There was a period of time before Dr. James Browder, who stayed in his position for 7 years, who was a local district person and vested in this community. For one period of 9 years, we had 7 superintendents, because historically in this district, we just weren't fortunate enough to get someone who came from another place, who was comfortable settling in here, who had a vested interest in this community, and didn't miss their home place, you know? So I think that's another thing we kind of have to keep in the back of our minds, is our historical perspective. And with that, I would say that definitely, I agree with Mrs. Morgan, there is no way that we can do anything concrete within 2 months. So we do need to have someone who will step in and be able to keep the ball rolling. So then that brings me to my next step, which is, what is the criteria for this interim person? Do we want someone who has an understanding of Florida law? Do we want someone who has knowledge of this community, and not only of this community, but of this district? So I think that that's another consideration. And then that being said, if a person were to come in and do this smooth transition with Dr. Atkins, and they did a really good job, would they still be disqualified from staying longer? So I just wanted to bring those things up, because I think that's something that I can't help but consider based on my history, and I wanted to be able to share that with everyone.
No, and thank you for that, because that helps me a great deal, as well as going back and watching. I know some of you have already been on these and have done that. Let me get Miss Giovanelli. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms.
No,
Fisher.
and the only other thing I wanted to say was, it's critically important that we do involve the community, different segments of the community, including some of our staff members, including some of our students, including, you know, the families and the business community who have, I mean, one thing I'll have to say, under Dr. Atkins' tenure, we have developed our relationship with the business community way beyond what it ever was before. And I think Mrs. Morgan will attest to that too. And we have a tremendous support from the business community, and a tremendous interest, because after all, you know, we're the economic driver and we're preparing the future workforce. So I think we have to be really careful how we proceed, and today we need to establish this process, agree on it, and get moving. So
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Ms. Giovanelli?
No, I agree with her.
okay.
I was scratching my head. And my
Oh,
hand
I'm
was
sorry.
going.
I thought you were like a side wave there. Ms. Morgan?
Yeah, so just adding a little historical perspective, I would say that the last 3 superintendent hires were not successful processes from the, in terms of how the community viewed what we did. And so I'm just reinforcing that. I believe that a structured process that involves somebody helping us make a deliberate, make step-by-step choices is what we've got to do. So I go back to, I think we need an interim. The reason I would hold out for a stipulation that they not apply is because as soon as you allow an interim to be a potential candidate, you lose potential candidates. And I think that, and I think frankly, there are people who are willing to step in and do it on an interim basis and would not seek to be superintendent. So I just want to say that, yes, we've hired superintendents before, but I would say that the process has not exactly been something that the community saw as a successful process and a successful transfer.
Okay. And I have to apologize. I thought that starting off with this and just seeing where our heads were at, that then we could then move forward with Ms. McClung helping us start with the processing, because then we know that, okay, we don't have to worry about the next, the district running for the next 60 days till June 30th. We know that it's going to continue to run, and that's something that we don't have to really worry about that, and we can concentrate on doing what we have to do as far as bringing an interim in and, you know, proceeding with the other policy procedures moving forward to get somebody in permanent. So that's where my thoughts were. So if that's not what everybody else is thinking, I'm okay with that. Ms. Gittens?
Okay, I spoke with a lady the other day that called me, and they have actually a search firm that does all of this. And one of the things I really want to see is that we do not do anything internally as far as this search is concerned. To be open and above board for the community, it all needs to happen outside. I would like to have this person at least speak to you all and show you the process. And they do everything from helping us to find the interim at the same time that they are looking for the permanent person. They do everything from the surveys and town halls. They set it up. They do the whole kit and caboodle. And I'm just thinking to have an outside company that has done this for several districts in Florida and elsewhere, that it would be worth our while to at least look at what they do, what it would cost, and they know the process. And I was particularly interested in the fact that they said they do set up the town halls, they do the tabulation of the information, they do the whole process, and they have references as well. So I'm just thinking, number one, I do not want it done internally, and number two, if we can get someone that is professional and has the experience in doing this, why not let them at least tell us what their process is?
Right. And Ms. Gittens, that's part of the process, exactly what you just said. So there's multiple, I mean, and that's something that Ms. McClung will, as we progress through here, that was one of the questions, so thank you. You know, is that what we want? And then if there are names of people, and then that's something that we will decide together, you know, as far as a firm that will come in and do this whole process, because I know we've been receiving, I got another one in the mail today, so we have been receiving multiple ones. And Ms. Vaughn, good afternoon.
Yeah, first, I have a comment, but I just want to apologize for being so late. I come on Metro, and there was no warning, got almost here, and they had the whole road blocked off and a big backup. I don't know what's going on, so I had to come all the way
Well, we're glad you're here.
back around. Anyway, I apologize for the lateness. I'm just diving in. I've looked at the notes.
I can put you where we're at right now. What we were speaking about was the very first thing that was said was,
Right.
We know Dr. Atkins is retiring on the 30th. That's his his last date. And so before we started on multiple conversations, I just want to make sure that that is where we want to be for him to be here to the 30th. So
Okay, and that's the comment actually that I was going to make, because I heard you say that. Personally, I feel we need to get an interim ASAP, and that we need to release Dr. Atkins from his contract whenever we get that interim, and wish him well. There's another thing that I would like to see done is, and I know it's a long process to get a someone permanent, and I do prefer, I know you've talked about it, an interim that is not a candidate for permanent, but should we find someone permanent, let's say in the next 7 months, okay? That person should be allowed to bring some of his or her staff here and do any changes that we feel as a board are necessary. When we interview these permanent people, I've been talking with, I've so far talked with a couple of the chiefs. I've gone out to a couple of the departments and talked, and you know, what do you see? What would you like? What would you do? Not as a superintendent, but if you could wave a magic wand, those sorts of things. And I think there is appetite for change throughout. I'm not talking about catastrophic change. I'm talking about some changes. And what I would like to see then, because I think it's only fair that a new person bring his or her staff, a few trusted staff members. It's been done with all the other superintendents. I would like to see that the contracts for directors and above that are due in, I guess, the end of June, go to 6-month contracts and not year-long contracts. Because I want to see the person that comes in to have the independence to, and you know, that person might very well extend another 6 months until he or she looks at the current staff and makes considerations. But, you know, we may well have, and it's my desire to have somebody with a different philosophy than the current superintendent. And in that case, I think it's only fair that that person not have to wait a whole year to bring in a few trusted staff members. So that would be what I would like to add to this list, that we do shorter contracts.
Okay, so Ms. Swan, thank you very much. Can we, in order so that we can have Ms. McClung help us and we can kind of like have this guided through so we can all be on the same track, and then add in everybody?
Is that not something
No,
that we
thank you.
can add?
No, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. But she'll have, so we can all have like a process that we're moving forward, which that's one of those
Well,
processes.
that would be part of the process.
Yes, but right now, I want to try to resolve the first issue, and is that getting a consensus for Dr. Atkins to, we're going to honor his contract for his retirement end date of June 30th.
So may I please ask a question before you take that vote?
Yes.
So that vote is to say then that we are agreeing that we will have an interim?
No, this is just saying that we're going to allow him to finish out his contract, which we should honor his contract till June 30th, so we can still continue to do the work that we need to do.
I can't say enough, though, that one is dependent on the other.
Chair Jordan.
Yes.
So I think having some bite-sized morsels of discussion, you have a lot of issues that are being brought up, and all very important issues, and they all need to be discussed. So if you can go step by step, bite-sized morsels, get your consensus on this, move on to the next topic, get your consensus, move on to the next, I think will be productive for the board. So right now, I think, and I understand what Ms. Gittens is saying, at some point, the board needs to discuss the interim, when the person starts, what's the process for selecting the interim, things of that nature. The first question is, are you going to allow Dr. Atkins to stay until June 30th? Get a consensus on that, and then move forward with the discussion on the interim and everything else that the board members have brought up. But I think we need to go bite-size morsel by morsel. And I know that Ms. McClung is here to help facilitate those discussions.
Yes, thank you, and that's exactly what I'm trying to do. Ms. Giovanelli, I know you had your hand up this time, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So, because I had to hear the conversations, but so how can we make a decision for Dr. Atkins to stay if we don't know what the process is going to be for, if it's the interim process? I think we need to establish the interim process, because obviously we've established that we know we're not going to get a permanent superintendent in 2 months. That we've already established, right? So that can be a note. So second is, I mean, we may have, someone may step up that wants to take, that's a superintendent, that's been maybe a superintendent that could jump in here and just keep the train moving. And that's what we want really right now in a temporary situation until we can get a national search. So I think we have to talk about what this looks like, because Dr. Atkins may not need to stay. I mean, we do this to employees all the time. When we're not renewing their contract, we've sent them home and they stay home and they get paid. So we can do that to the superintendent. So and to allow the work to continue. So I think we have to think about that. So I think it's all about we have to establish the process for this short-term superintendent.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Giovanelli. Ms.
Madam
McClung?
Chair, maybe if we could clarify a little bit the items that we did want to come to consensus on today, so that I think the first thing to realize is that it is going to be a very long process to get the permanent superintendent, which several of you have acknowledged this morning. The second item is there will need to be an interim superintendent, because you're not going to find someone by June 30th, which you have also acknowledged. I think the overriding thing at this point is that I've heard many of you say you want to have a transition in place that is a smooth transition and involves your community as much as possible. In order to do that, most of what I've been hearing is that people would like to see Dr. Atkins agree to stay to the end of his contract to June 30th, which provides you time to decide what qualities you want in that interim superintendent, who is going to be here for probably 6 to 8 months. And that's quite a long time for someone to just step in without having some transition time. So the first nugget was to decide, will you agree that Dr. Atkins should continue till June 30th? Once that decision is made, once that consensus has been decided, then you would look at, when would you want that interim to come in place? So would there be some overlap time there? And if so, that's going to drive the rest of that process, because that's going to make decisions, that's going to crunch your timeline, depending on where you are, into what you're able to do in terms of seeking applicants, if you are going to involve the community in the interim, if you're going to hire a search firm. That's not something that you generally would do without some exploration of the availability of the firms and what they have to offer. So even if you decided right now you wanted Dr. Atkins to leave tomorrow, that would leave you in quite a lurch in terms of being able to put someone else in place. So I would ask if the call could be made for the consensus, so that we have a determination of the timeline that we're working with. And that way we'll have a better idea of where to start when we start looking at what else do you want to determine around that interim superintendent search. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McClung. So, Ms. Gittens.
Can I suggest, again, I'm visual, that if we had, at least some columns, and the items would be on one side and the priority another would go along the side. So we can say, we know we need to know about an interim. We know we need to know about June the 30th for the superintendent. We know we need to discuss the permanent person, the search process, if we're going to use someone. All these things that we're talking about can go on one side, and then we sort that out as to priority. That way everyone can kind of see what it is that it's just a suggestion. But.
Okay, thank you.
If we could have a consensus, I believe that's
Yes,
our
thank
first
you.
step.
So may I please have a consensus
Ms.
on?
Giovanelli had her hand up.
Oh, Ms. Giovanelli?
So let's be realistic here. Okay, we were all at the meeting last night. This district is in chaos by our own community and the stakeholders. So I think that the sooner, you can't tell me that not one of you don't have a couple of names to get this interim started. I don't know that we need to have a company tell us how to hire an interim right now. They haven't in the past. Maybe for the process of a national search, and we hire a company to do the national search and get that. But for right now, immediately, we need to act. This district is on fire, and if you're not listening to the people that's calling you, then I'm going to be surprised, because we've had numerous people tell us that. So we need to move quickly. We have a current situation right now where we have information that was given to us 2 days ago that was from a year ago that I've been requesting the information. This information was kept from this board for over a year, of 2 employees that have a suit that is against the district that has won. So we have to address these issues now. And we're not going to, in June, a lot of damage can be done by the end of June. I'm sorry. We've already have enough damage done to this district at this point in time. Let's not be silly. Thank you.
Ms. Vaughn.
You know, we have a very split board. Obviously, if you've read our comments on Dr. Atkins' evaluation, although his evaluation came out as effective, not one of us rated him as effective. It was either highly or on the other end of the scale. So one of the things that I think we need to consider, and we need to look at how those evaluations fell and the comments on it. One of the things is we're not going to be successful if we don't if we don't have a board that's going to agree. If we can't have at least a 2-5 vote, preferably unanimous, I doubt that that's going to ever happen, but whoever comes in as an interim is not going to be successful. I agree with Mrs. Giovanelli that there are a lot of things that can be done that are destructive to us, and we have not had a chance yet to look at the evaluations and look at some of our comments. And I personally think that we need to move ASAP. Now, I wasn't on the board when Dr. Graham left, but I know Ms. Fisher was, Ms. Morgan was. It seems to me that she left with very little notice, and that Dr. Atkins was put in, was he not, as an interim almost immediately? Okay? Right, Ms. Fisher, could you elaborate on how that process went?
Yes, Dr. Graham informed us that she would be leaving within the next day or so. So, I'm sorry, Mrs. Morgan, will you?
Yes, you know that she submitted her resignation several months out, and then the board met and terminated her immediately. That was Graham.
Okay, well, that's what I'm trying to get to. I mean, I vaguely remember it, but I wasn't on the board, so I'm just trying to see if we can't, those of us that maybe aren't that familiar with it, hear from you guys that were here and how that process worked. And okay, so you're saying it didn't. Well, I remember you were out of town when the board,
That's right.
when the board put Dr. Atkins in as permanent. I remember that. Guess it worked out all right for you,
But a while, you get lucky.
yeah.
Doesn't mean you're good.
Well, exactly, but I'm just curious, how did that happen, and what are the lessons of that, pro or con?
Thank you, Ms.
Please
Vaughn.
hear the answer to
I
that.
think Ms. Fisher shared the history already. Could you please reshare the history?
Yes, we held a special meeting because we needed to get someone in there, because by law, you have to have a superintendent, okay? So we had a special meeting, and just recently, I was able to rewatch it because one of our community members sent it out, copied it and sent it out to us. So you can look at that and get your answer, how it happened. It was a discussion. Dr. Atkins accepted. He had the history. He had done many
Called him,
different.
did you not?
I did. I know I didn't call him. I texted him. Okay.
We need to move forward.
Yeah, so what, and this again, we're not looking at someone who has been terminated. We're not looking at a resignation. We're looking at somebody who is retiring. As of June 30th, they have given us over 2 months notice that they will be retiring, which allows us the time to get names in, to get a process in place, to go ahead and get an interim or acting superintendent until we decide if we're going to utilize, allow those, whoever that individual is to put their names in for the permanent, or are we going for national? There's so many other things that we have to get through to see how we're going to roll,
Jordan,
to go with this.
Excuse me. I understand this is a workshop, but can we just get our consensus on step number one?
That's what I'm trying to do
Is Dr.
that.
Atkins staying? Then the next step is, okay, what will we do for an interim? And I'm putting that in quotes. What will that process be?
Thank
Okay.
you.
Will that person come in before his contract is up and overlap? Will they have a transition period? We need to, I think we need to agree on step number one and then move to step number two and keep this going, because we're digging ourselves a hole here that is.
No, we're
getting
gathering
deeper and deeper.
information, is what we're doing.
Just, Ms. Gittens.
I'd just like to note, Ms. Jordan, Dr. Graham retired. She did not resign. She
No,
retired.
Ms. Giovanelli, I didn't state that anybody
Well, you're
retired or
making it sound
resigned.
like-
I'm just saying, right now, what we have Dr. Atkins, who has given us notification that he is retiring. That, I'm speaking on him. I don't know the other people. I don't know what occurred with them. All I know is what we have before us, and if I could please get consensus on this one item, so that way we can move on to the next steps.
Ms. Jordan, may I make a comment, please? We were told that you and the attorney were spending time looking at what had happened previously so that you could inform us, contacting other districts as to what they did so that you could inform us. I don't see the necessity of rushing to a vote until we have discussed. That's why I think this is, it's like we're rushing. So I want to hear what happened previously. If it was so bad, then why did we, have him for 5 years? I want to know the information as to when Dr. Graham turned in whatever it was, what happened then? The board had a special meeting. What happened? How did they come up with one person? Were there other people that were nominated at that time? And that's all I'm asking before I can make a decision.
Thank you. Ms. Morgan?
And I'm asking you to poll the board to see if they're prepared to move forward to have a discussion about the 30th. And if we're prepared to move forward as a group to have a discussion about the 30th, let's do it. If we're not, then let's have this conversation.
Okay. And just for clarification, the board attorney and I, separately as you or anyone else, has been contacting people. I've watched videos. I've done all of that as well and have done my research. And it was regarding how do we work through the process? And that's why we have Ms. McClung here to assist us in facilitating this day with Ms. Stillwell here to capture everything that is being stated by all of us. So that way we're all here and we all have our inputs for this. Everybody's going to be heard. All of our information will be gathered and it's going to be on, put on the screen, and then we will have a conversation regarding that. So if I could please just get the one answer, which we've already discussed for
We haven't.
44 minutes. Ms. Vaughn.
I agree with Ms. Gittens. Ms. Fisher was starting to give us that information from her perspective, and I'd be happy to hear it from Ms. Morgan's perspective as well. And I am not ready. If you want to poll me, I am not ready. I know the way I'm going to vote, but I want to hear what happened, because I know that in that process, there was a quick turnaround to get an interim. And I also know that Dr. Atkins was called, or as Ms. Fisher said, texted, you know, hey, Greg, you'd be great for this. And I also know that people have been in the community already. There have been community members already putting forth their recommendations on certain people. I mean, I heard the short list a long time ago, like about the day after all of this, the short list was out there. And so I want to see something that is not a board member of more influence calling up and going, hey, Susie, I think you should be superintendent. I'm going to call all my influential friends and have them write the board members and tell them, you know, I've worked with Susie and or whatever. I don't think it should be done that way. I think it needs to be, and I think that maybe those of us that, you know, again, huge divide.
No, and
There's
Ms. Vaughn,
valuations, and those of you that voted on the high end, I think you're trying to manipulate this. I really do. And I think we need fact gathering, and that's my
and
opinion.
I appreciate what you're saying, and I agree with you. It should not be based on phone calls or friends of friends of friends. I totally agree with you. Ms. McClung?
Madam Chair, perhaps since there is not an appetite right now to come to consensus, maybe the question that should be addressed first is, what process do you want to use to decide upon your superintendent? Is it going to be a process where you put forward names and make a decision, or is it going to be a process where you solicit applications, review those, because that will make a big difference in the timeline. So I'm hearing both. I'm hearing we could decide this tomorrow. I'm hearing that we need to involve our community and go through a process. So if we could address that question, maybe that will help with the consensus question.
Thank you. Ms. Gittens?
The only question I would like to hear at this point from members that were present or involved was what process did you use to choose an interim? That determines my decision about it.
Thank you. So we have, and I know you've sat, Ms. Gittens, you have sat on one of those as a community member. I've seen that. So if you would please indulge us, Ms. Fisher and Ms. Morgan, on your past experiences with how it was chosen.
Just the interim piece right now.
Correct, the interim piece. Ms. Fisher, would you please, if you don't mind?
I prefer to have Mrs. Morgan go first, because
Thank you.
I'm not sure that my memory is accurate.
Thank you.
And I'm not going to discuss it because it was a failed process. So I don't think there's any point in going over it again. I think we need to start as a new board. We all agree that we need to find a common path forward. I don't think we need to go over what worked or didn't work in the past. We need to start from here, and we need to go forward.
Fair enough.
And if I may, that's just the reason I asked the question, because you can learn as much from a failed process as a successful.
But what I think is, what I thought,
What were the failures, Ms. Morgan?
the failures were that there was no board deliberation and no community participation.
Okay.
Madam Chair, if I may, I think the question from the discussions from the board with regards to this June 30th is whether or not, one, you want Dr. Atkins to stay until June 30th, or do you want Dr. Atkins to leave sooner and you have an interim sooner? One way or another, you're going to have an interim. I've had an opportunity to review the videotape from, I believe it was 2015 in that process. And it was basically a discussion. There was some urgency because the superintendent, I think, was 1 or 2 days before that superintendent was going to leave. And the board had to make a very quick decision. They discussed it, and I believe it was Ms. Fisher, texted somebody, Dr. Atkins, can you do it? And the intent was for that person to be a placeholder until such time as they can finish the process. The decision that you have before you is that you do have somebody who is willing to stay until June 30th, or you can decide to find that placeholder. But we need to have some direction in terms of how you want to move forward. You need to come up with your decision and your process, how you want to move forward with this small part. You have many, many other decisions that you have to make. This is just one part of that decision. So I would, and I would also say this, I've had an opportunity to speak to Dr. Atkins. He's made his wishes very, very clear. His intent is to have a smooth transition. Whatever the board decides, it is the board's will, and he will work with whatever the board wants to happen. But we do need to move this forward. So I guess the question at this point is, do you want to have Dr. Atkins stay until June 30th, or do you want him to leave sooner? And because both of those processes will be different. If he leaves sooner, you're going to have to pick up somebody very, very quickly to be able to replace him, because you must have a superintendent per the law. If he leaves June 30th, that gives you some time to be able to go through a process, vet a person to get that interim while you do, I suspect, a national search and whatever you need to do to be able to find your permanent. So that's where you are right now. You do need to make a decision as to how you want to move forward.
Okay, so we're back to, again, that same question, which do we want to allow Dr. Atkins to continue his contract till his retirement date of June 30th, which would then give us the opportunity to speak about other interims and get information, so that way we can, not just off the cuff, pick a person or based on somebody's phone call or text or whatever, we could then have that opportunity to do our own research on those individuals. So we would have that, everyone would have those names, then we could come back together and discuss those individuals and make a decision based on what we have learned or what we feel about that placeholder.
So, Madam Chair, once you have that consensus, at that point, the board, if the board decides the June 30th, then you know how much time you have and what you're able to do in terms of advertising, collecting resumes, however you want to do it. And then if the board decides that, I want Dr. Atkins to leave tomorrow, then you know what you need to do with regards to that. Make some phone calls and find a replacement very quickly. So the board needs to make that decision. I think at this point, you probably should call for your consensus to see where your board is at this time.
Okay, may I please call for consensus on allowing Dr. Atkins to remain till June 30th, which would give us the opportunity to put an interim, take our time to get the interim and do it the proper way. If you're in agreement, please put your thumbs up.
I can live with whatever. I still don't have answers to my questions, so whatever.
5-2.
At this point, you have a consensus of 5-2 for Dr. Atkins to stay until June 30th. So I know that Ms. McClung will facilitate the discussion in terms of what do you do now until June 30th with regards to securing an interim. What process do you want to have?
Thank you. And so the first question, I believe, is do you want to name a person from names that you apparently have brought to the table, or do you want to go through a process where you would accept applications and have a review process? That's the first question. So discussion around that.
Ms. Vaughn.
Okay, I want to go back to my suggestion that I made a little while ago. If Dr. Atkins is to stay until the 30th, I would like to see a board directive to him that contracts for directors and above be 6 months and not 12. because I think that opens the door for whoever the new person is, both as an interim and as, when we have a permanent superintendent, they wouldn't be locked into anything. They would be able to form their own administration, and they would be able to start fresh. And I think that's, again, we have a very split board here, and I would say that there are at least several of us that want to see that. And again, I reference, so for anybody out there in the listening world or media, I reference the way the evaluations came out right before Dr. Atkins decided that it was time to retire.
Ms. Gittens?
Okay, well, first of all, let me explain my vote,
Please.
because Ms. Morgan mentioned that one of the flaws of the process that they used previously was lack of community input. And I would like to see us rectify that, and that will take a little bit of time to do. So that's why I said it's fine for him to stay until the 30th. However, like I said previously, with caveats, not signing everything that, is out there to sign and moving forward with all types of things. This is just, basically, he is our interim until we get our regular interim. That's the way that I see it. The company that I spoke to was talking about the process and involving the community and selecting the permanent superintendent. It also can happen for the interim. And I would say that we would do the same process. It would just be shorter and quicker, that we would have a community input some way, select the interim so we don't repeat what happened before. And at the same time, simultaneously, we are looking for the permanent superintendent. So I've been saying for going on 3 years, community involvement, so.
No, thank you, Ms. Gittens. Ms. Morgan?
Yeah, I'd like to ask the board attorney a question. So we would have to do an RFQ if we hired a search firm, correct? We can't just go out and say we want this person or this firm. Don't we have to?
Well, no, we'd have to select.
So it's my understanding that we could actually choose a search firm. However, the best process would be able to solicit and get as much information and have some different firms for the board to be able to consider, and have those individuals come in and present to the board and explain to them what they can offer, and also to demonstrate to the board what they've done in the past, what will work with this district. So that would be my recommendation.
Thank you.
And then I guess my question, is that for the interim, or we're talking about the permanent
It would be for both.
No,
superintendent?
I'm talking about permanent.
Well, then how are you going to involve the community in the whole process?
So one of the things that the board can consider is something similar as to what you did with hiring the school board attorney, where you have individuals submit their applications, you have an open meeting for interview process where the public can come in. You can do another briefing if you want, so the public can make comments. Obviously, this would have to be ratified in an action meeting, so again, the public's involvement is there. So there's various ways to be able to do that. You just have to figure out how you want to do it as a board. What are the steps that you want to see take place in this interim process, and how you want to include the community in this interim process. Now, I will tell you, you don't have a lot of time, because you have now until June 30th. So you really do need to figure out this process so that it can get started as soon as possible.
Madam Chair, I'm hearing
Sorry.
a lot of discussion around a process. Could we just get consensus on, do you want to appoint immediately or have a process? Because if we are sure that there is a longer-term process, then we could start discussing what that would entail. So if we could have a consensus as to whether the board wants to have an application process, that would let us know what else we need to do
Thank you, for the interim.
for the interim.
Okay, so our conversation is on the interim at this moment.
ask a question, please?
Ms. Gittens?
Okay. My suggestion is, as soon as possible, within the week that we contact individuals, we have a special meeting, we contact companies that would be interested, and by next week, we should be able to have them. Companies are not going to put it off because they would want the business. So I'm thinking that by next week, we could have some proposals if we put out an RFQ this week. And the reason that I'm talking about having the same process for the interim as the permanent superintendent, because there's always the outside chance that we get an interim and somehow or another there's 4 or 5 votes, people change their mind and suddenly decide that that person is going to be superintendent. So I think we need to take every step necessary as if we were getting a superintendent, because there's always the possibility that that will pop up. It did with Dr. Atkins. It can happen again.
So I get, Ms. Patrica?
Attorney Dupree-Bruno, is there a way to structure a contract with an interim that would hold both the board and the interim superintendent accountable is not the right word, but require both of us to not accept that person as the permanent? Is there a way to guarantee that in the language of a contract?
So you can put it in the contract, but just be aware that people can change their mind, and you can do an amendment to the contract. So that's the only thing.
You said people can change their minds.
Be the board and the
But it would require a
person.
majority of the board to change.
It would require a majority of the board, yes.
And what I'm hearing so far, with very little exception, is that the interim can't serve as the permanent. So I think that if we make that very clear in the interim search process, then that would attract people who are not interested in serving as the permanent, and we simply disqualify them from the application process.
So I think, Madam Chair, a consensus to make sure that that is the will of the board, that they do not want the interim to apply for the permanent position. I think we need clear direction from the board.
Could we have consensus then around, would you want the interim to be able to be in the selection, in the selection for the permanent superintendent's position? If
You're asking it as a negative.
Okay.
So are you saying, okay, is the vote that you do not want the interim to be able to apply for permanent?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Can I just make one comment on that?
Yeah.
I don't have any experience in a superintendent search, but I do remember when Attorney Martin stepped down.
Yes.
We had one applicant,
Right.
and that's because the public perceived him as being the heir apparent. And I believe that if the board doesn't come out with a strong, unified statement that the interim is just that, an interim, then it could negatively impact the pool of candidates for the permanent position. Those are my comments. Thank you.
I'm not sure I understand what she just said.
Ms. Patrica,
May I?
please.
When we hired the successor for Keith Martin, we put, we advertised for it, and everybody knew Rob Dodig was applying, and not another attorney in the state of Florida put their name in, because he was perceived as the heir apparent. If we have an interim who is eligible to apply for the permanent, the perception could exist that this person is the heir apparent, thus chilling the desire of other good candidates from applying. Understand that this is a very, very public process, and anybody that puts their name in is signaling to their current employer, their current school board, their current school district, everybody in that community that they're looking to leave. And so we want to make that pool as large and as robust as possible, and I believe one of the things that can get us there is to limit the interim to just that. It's an interim. And again, if we're seeing strong agreement, or at least I can live with it amongst the whole board, I think that sends a strong signal. I understand both sides decide to breach. There's no legal remedy. But if we have that commitment, then I think we're in a better position to attract a strong pool.
Okay,
Can
so may
Can
I?
I just say on that, really quickly, that is the reason that I would be pushing for it not to be an heir apparent, not anyone in the district. That way, it would avoid that heir apparent type situation.
So, Madam Chair, if I may, probably getting a consensus on that first part in terms of whether or not it's going to be somebody who's going to be able to apply for the permanent position. And then you have another you'll need another consensus in terms of whether or not somebody from within can apply or if it has to be external. You know, we're building the process at this point.
Right. Ms. Fisher?
I just want to comment that over the years with Dr. Atkins, the board, whoever the board was at the time, has encouraged him to have a succession plan, which then we have people who may be interested in a long-time superintendency. And let me qualify that, because the average tenure of a superintendent in the state of Florida is around 3 years. So we have Dr. Atkins, who exceeded that, almost doubled it, and he was the interim. And again, statutorily, the superintendent is the superintendent. Once they're sworn in, I don't care what you call them, but they're the superintendent. And boards come and go, and they do change their mind, because when you look at someone's performance and you're satisfied with it and you think that it's moving this district forward, then maybe you say, well, he's doing a good job, let's keep him, which is exactly what happened. Again, another historical perspective. So I think that we have to be thoughtful about doing this. And I'm sensing that I hear that we should be entertaining no one from the district or from within. And I would like a little clarification about why that is. And, and also, then does that mean that when we do our second search, which is going to be for the permanent or long-term superintendent, that we are eliminating people from within who have been part of the succession planning that the board requested? I'm just asking.
Madam
Thank you.
Chair, just so that we can stay on target, if we can do bite-size, so the question about external versus internal, I think is probably the next conversation. If we can get the consensus on whether or not the interim will serve as a permanent. I just need to see where the board is on that, please.
Okay, so may we please have consensus on the first? Would we allow the interim to apply for the permanent position? I know, I changed it.
But that's
Putting it in a positive way.
So now we're voting,
Thank you for that.
allow, okay,
The interim
we would allow, okay.
to apply, whoever is put in that position, would we allow them to apply for the permanent position of superintendent?
So that's 2 yes.
May I ask a question?
Yeah, it's 5 no's, right?
I think this is a really important one for us to, let me say, I came to today's meeting with no favorites, no, this is where I have to go, this is where I can't go. I didn't come here with my mind made up about anything. What I was really hoping to do was to get 7 thumbs sideways on every issue. So if I may, through the chair, ask Ms. Fisher, what can we do to get you on board with the question, will we allow the interim to apply for the permanent position? What can we do to get you on board with that, please?
Ms. Fisher?
Well, I think I just explained myself, that, first of all, the interim is the superintendent. And if someone is doing a good job in that role and moving this district forward, which, we have a responsibility to keep the ball rolling in this district. We have a responsibility to our staff who have spent their entire careers in this district, not necessarily to become superintendent, but to educate our future workforce, to care for the children in our community, to benefit our community. And so I'm not, you never know from day to day what's going to happen. And my experience tells me that you have to be flexible and open-minded. This is a huge undertaking, and we need a leader. But and we decide on who it is. But I don't think that we should leave any stone unturned or eliminate anybody just by virtue of some personal feeling that anyone in the district is not going to do a good job, because I can't agree with that.
If I may, Ms. Fisher, that's not what I'm suggesting.
Okay.
I'm not suggesting that it has to be internal. I'm not suggesting that it has to be external. I'm simply suggesting that the pool of applicants for the permanent, which could include internal, external, when we get to that point, we can discuss that question. But for this specific question, I'm suggesting that the application pool for the permanent position, I believe, will be more robust if we as a board can reach thumb sideways. And I also think that there'll be more trust, sort of, and belief in each other on the board, which we need to improve. If I know that Ms. Vaughn is not talking to the interim about, well, I really want to make sure you're the permanent. You know what I mean? Like, it's a commitment to each other that interim really is a placeholder. I understand things could change. I get that. I'm not eliminating that possibility. I'm just asking for sort of a united decision in that regard so that we can send that signal to the public. Anybody that wants to apply, there's no heir apparent here. This is genuinely a robust search process. That's all I'm asking for.
Ms. Schiavinelli?
And I just want to remind everybody that normally that there's an assistant superintendent that would kind of step in and be that role. Well, we don't have one. There's not one. We do not have an actual assistant superintendent. That position has not been filled for the whole time I've been here. So that's, at other districts, that's what they have, and that would happen. So I think that is important to know. So we have to, for the process for a permanent position to be, and the process to build our trust back, I agree with Ms. Patrica that we have to have that ability that everyone knows that they're on equal playing field when they apply for the permanent position. And that would not be the case if we leave it open for the interim just to step right in and be the superintendent. If that's the case, let's just do that right now. Let's just make a superintendent like they did when Ms. Morgan was on vacation. So.
Thank you. Ms. Vaughn?
Listen carefully, Chris. I agree absolutely with what Ms. Patrica has said. My thought is that if we have, and I also, my thought first of all is not to make this an official through a company that, that we have a search company for the interim. If we have people in the community, retirees, for instance, from other districts, well, not somebody who's like 90, but somebody who has the willingness and to do the job here, that would be great. If we have people that are currently chiefs or executive directors or whatever position that feel that they want to do this, but with the understanding that they will not be eligible to apply for permanent. When it gets to permanent, I think we should have a search company, a nationwide search, and last time I checked, Lee County is part of this country, and so at that time, people from this district that would like the position of permanent superintendent, they apply along with whoever else we get from the outside, and we have a fair process looking at everything. I know from my point of view, I want to see changes. I ran on getting changes, and I think that we need to be really careful how we proceed in these next months, because we need to stop being the district of, oh, I like this person, I've worked with them for 25 years and they did me a favor and I'm going to do them a favor back, and you know, this one is like a son to me and I'm going to do for that person. No, that's not how a professional world-class school district operates. We don't operate on cronyism. We operate with seeking the best candidate, and I think to move this school district along to where we want to be, we need to move it along and to be as open-minded as we can.
Thank you, Ms. Vaughn. So, Ms. McClung, so
Thank you.
You have that.
So we now have
as far as-
consensus on 2 items. We have consensus that the superintendent will stay until June 30th, and we have consensus that the interim at this point will not be considered for the permanent position. So our next item to address what's been discussed recently here is, do you want the interim to be an internal person to be considered as the interim superintendent, or would you relegate it only to external candidates?
We have,
Were we able to move you at all on the last consensus?
Well, you know, I mean, I knew that we had consensus already, and in an effort to help build some more trust in this governance team, I can live with it, of course.
so can you please
I knew I was
change
gonna
the
live with it
process?
anyway.
The last one, it will be
So,
live with it and 5 no.
yes, so whoever's taking the vote there.
Perfect, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Ms.
And then the next item is, will the interim superintendent, will internal candidates be considered for the interim or the short-term superintendent position?
Thank you. Okay, any comments on what Ms. McClung just said? Ms. Morgan?
I'm happy to look at a list that has internal and external.
Thank you. Do we have consensus on that, or is there any comments? Okay.
Madam Chair, you may want to just kind of just go down the line and
Okay,
ask the
Ms.
board.
Vaughn?
Both internal and external.
Thank you. Ms. Gittens?
External.
Ms. Fisher?
I have a quick comment, and then I'll give that vote. So in some districts, we call them assistant superintendents. In our district, we call them chiefs, and they've been part of the succession plan. So they are assisting the superintendent in their different departments. So yes, internal and external.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Ms. Patrica?
I would prefer internal and external, but I can live with external if that will get 7 thumbs sideways.
Ms. Giovanelli?
So I have to make a comment too.
Thank you.
We've had numerous chiefs that has changed since I've been on the board. The only one that has stayed the same, and one left and came back to the same position. So there's one, and there was another one that has stayed. But then that the other chiefs have all came and went, and there's been new ones. So I think that's irrelevant, that haven't been here that long. So I think that's relevant. As far as an interim, I can live with the board's decision on that.
Thank you. And I as well. So can we take Ms. Gittens?
Is there going to be a point where we discuss the parameters, I guess, lack of a better word, job description of that interim and of the superintendent from now to the 30th?
Correct, yes.
Yes, ma'am, but first, if we could decide who those applicants can be, then we'll go on with other questions.
So, Ms. Gittens, you were the only one that was external only. Will you change your mind, or you're going to stick with that for the interim? Because they're going to come before us. We'll have a process that we'll be able to speak to them to make the decision as a whole.
And this person will not be able to apply for permanent at this
Correct.
point?
That is correct.
That would be in the contract, correct? We can put that in the
Yes,
contract.
yes, yes.
Okay, Ms. Patrica.
Thank you.
You and your sideways.
Thank you.
Formal consensus, please.
Yes. Consensus is.
But I'm
yes.
sideways. Make sure you say I'm sideways.
Sideways.
6 and 1 sideways.
Thank
You
you.
got two
Yes.
sideways.
7.
Okay, so we now have the superintendent will stay till June 30th. We will have internal and external who would both be considered. So we're good there. Our next item is, do you prefer to hire a firm or develop a process, an internal process to look at candidates?
I'm sorry, Ms. McClung, could you repeat that, please?
Yes, would you prefer to hire a firm to search for the interim superintendent or to develop an internal process to search for the interim superintendent?
Okay, Miss, I'm going to start with Ms. Giovanelli.
Say that again?
Would you like to hire this is for the interim, so would you like to hire a firm or come up with a process for the interim?
No, we need to.
Know what?
We need to expedite this. I'll be honest with you, we shouldn't do a firm at this point in time. We should actually, I don't understand why we just didn't even come to the table with names today. Let the people come tonight and stakeholders discuss it or give us their opinions and pick an interim. That's pretty quickly, like they did when Dr. Graham was leaving. So absolutely, I don't think we can do a firm for the national search for the permanent.
Thank you.
I mean,
Madam Chair, I'm sorry. I skipped a step. We had talked earlier about whether you wanted to appoint someone, or do an application process, and we did have discussion, but we never did call for a consensus on that. So let's go back to that. Do you want to have an application process which would require that applicants submit a resume and there would be a review process? Or do you want to, as Ms. Giovanelli was just discussing, look at names and make a decision? So if we could have discussion around those two options.
Thank you. Okay, so Ms. Giovanelli, I'm going back to you again.
I think we need to move this process along. No certain, we need to pick some names, and I can promise you, I know people have names at this table, and I'm about to prepare to bring one to the table if that's what y'all want me to do.
Okay, Ms. Patrica?
Application process.
Thank you.
Application process.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Ms. Gittens?
If we say application, then you have to say what's the process, who's going to review the applications. We're just prolonging it. We're prolonging it, no.
So, no. Okay, thank you. Ms. Vaughn?
Applications.
Thank you.
Application.
Ms. Morgan? And I as well, applications, only because a name to me really means nothing. Please, I want to be able to take that information, digest it, and then come to the table with all of you and have a conversation on who that will be. Ms.
Because following the application process, assuming that we had 2 or 3 names that were popular, then they would fill out an application, and we, as a board, could interview them. And that, I think that would give everyone an opportunity to ask their specific questions and get the answers that they need to feel comfortable moving forward, as board members.
And that's something
Madam
that
Chair.
could be in the public as well.
Madam Chair, if we could first come to consensus on whether names or application, because what Mrs. Fisher has just suggested is an internal process. So then we could go to the firm search or an internal process. It sounded like we had consensus, but if you could ask for a formal consensus around the application process, please.
Thank you. Could I please have a formal, do you have a question
I
real
do
quick?
have a question.
Go ahead.
For the, I didn't hear 7 thumbs up or 7 thumbs sideways. I could be wrong. So for those that would be against an application process, how would we find external candidates without an application process?
Ms. Giovanelli?
Because everyone knows the people I know, they know, everybody knows them, but you would get their application, so you would get their resume or whatever. we can do that. That's not a problem, I don't believe.
That would be the application process, would be
I mean, kinda, but, I
gathering.
mean, names are names. I've got like 3, so.
Ms. Vaughn?
Well, if we're going to involve the public with this, have public input, we may know a lot of the names, but they won't. And so I think it would be, an expedited, an expedited process. I know when HR does this, it's a little bit different, but, we can decide maybe a resume and a group interview and a, kind of like we did with the board attorney. Didn't we do, I think we did resume, and we talked to the final candidates. In that case, HR narrowed them down, but in this case, we would have all of them unless we had somebody who clearly did not have the experience that we need. And we might even set up minimum expectations on that. And then we had group and compared and, something expedited, so it wouldn't take us 2 months just to get this done. But I think we definitely need something on paper so that the public has a basis of comparison.
And then they would be able to come here and sit down here in a briefing where the public could then be engaged in this whole process as well. Ms. Gittens, because I think that was a question on the,
As
Change
to
your-
why I didn't want application.
yes.
Okay, application is not bad in my mind. What is bad is all the convoluted things that go around that, who's going to do this and that. If it is confined to us as the board and the governance team to look at them, I think in the next 2 weeks, that process can be done.
Yes.
I mean, because all we need to do, if someone's really interested, they'll send in their application by next Tuesday.
I say by Friday.
Okay. Well, I'm saying if we give them a time, turn it in by, even if you said by Friday, then we get all of the applications, they can be scanned in, we get a chance to look at them. We need some type of a rubric or whatever that we're looking at, as we're looking at it. Then we set up, that takes us to the next week when we are going to have a meeting anyway, so we could have a morning meeting on the Monday of the 10th when we have another meeting.
We actually, Ms. Gittens, I know just for the sake of saving dates, we had several dates just put on hold for all of you. So that way you could do your calendar around for just this. If we have to have something sooner that's going to accommodate everybody, that's great. But I know we did have, we went like, I think it was every 2 weeks that we had put
A few dates up?
held dates for you,
Okay.
for everybody for this specific reason. Ms. Dupree Bruno?
At this time, I think that what Ms. Giddens was talking about was going into the process itself, which is really some great thoughts. We still need some confirmation with regard to the consensus, and based on the conversation I heard, I think at this point we may be looking at 7 votes for someone to submit an
As
application.
to what? We're looking at what?
To the vote, did we have to change your mind and to
With regard-
consensus?
Well, my thing about my vote is, first of all, the board has to have complete control of it.
Will.
Not anyone else. And we have control of the applications, the process, and the whole thing. It's our decision as a board.
So step 1, whether or not you wanted to have an application, and I do believe that Ms. McClung's step 2 was whether or not you're going to do the internal process versus a firm, and then step 3, if you are, it sounds like you're leaning towards an internal process. If you are going to do that, how are you going to do that? So we got 3 steps, but let's go back to step 1 so we can finish this round in terms of the consensus on the application and then move forward to the next 2 steps.
Okay. I will go sideways if it is a board-controlled and board-run situation.
Thank you. So, Ms. Thomas, did you get that? So the consensus again, please? And Ms. Giovanelli, did you
I was
go
actually-
sideways?
I'm a sideways as well. I
Okay,
will
so-
only do it if it's totally board controlled
It
and
is
not,
board control, it will definitely be.
all
board
the resumes come to us as,
And that's the process that we will.
We will
come
get
up
to
with
that
next.
process. If that is,
That's the
if
next
that is
step.
your agreement, that is fine. So we do have consensus that you would like to have an application process.
Correct.
What I'm hearing from this consensus is also that it will be an internal process.
Correct.
Internally, and define that as the board.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. One thing I do want to remind you as we're developing this internal process for the board is that if you choose an external candidate, that they will need to go through the fingerprints, the background check and everything, so just make sure we are considering that in the timeline. That's absolutely, you want to be able to consider those external candidates. We don't want a timeline to prohibit that.
Ms. Patrica?
I'm sorry, I'm not clear on what a board-controlled process means.
So my,
I believe that we need guidance, whether that guidance comes from the inside or the outside, I don't really care, but I believe we need guidance for, I think we can all look each other in the eyes honestly and say that if we're going to try to agree to the steps of the process, that is going to be the longest marathon we've ever had. But if we have somebody guiding us through the process and saying this is the length of time for the application process, this is when the interviews will take place, this is when a decision needs to be made.
And thank you.
ma'am,
Ms.
I
LaPlante?
believe what we're,
We're doing that.
and let me say how I'm interpreting this, and then please correct me if I'm wrong, is our normal process would be to go through our Human Resources Department, where it would be advertised through our HR and possibly elsewhere, and then they would apply through that process, through our PeopleSoft process that we normally use. What I am hearing is a desire to set up a different process where perhaps there would be an email address that they would send resumes to, that all board members would have access to, that you would develop your own rubrics, that you would be the ones who reviewed those. I have not heard anything so far about involving community in that, although I heard it earlier. So all those steps would need to be discussed. But first, let's clarify, are you looking at a process that would not run through our Human Resources Department?
Can you please clarify that? Because when we, that can only take place if we do not have people from the outside. Because if you have people from the outside, they have to go through that process, correct?
They would have to go through a background check process, yes, ma'am.
And then
They're
how,
chosen.
If we chose them.
If they're chosen.
okay, so I know that we had talked and we have had separate emails that we had created for the COVID situation, and maybe we could have one email that it would go directly to that, and perhaps it would come into the board office, and then that way all the resumes could be disseminated to the board members at that time. Or if we could put, I don't know if, I'm not a tech person like that, or if we could put, if that email could just automatically go out to all of the board members.
All board members could have access to a separate email account, yes, that's possible. Or
Ms.,
board docs, but board docs,
Or it can be
I'm not sure
forwarded.
about the privacy of board docs, so we'd have to
Let
look
me
at that.
make sure on this.
Same
on
thing,
this
it-
Safety.
Sorry, I'm so
Yeah, the email
sorry.
address,
Free-
we have a separate email address for like our COVID help. We had one for reopening schools, and you can determine who has access to that email.
Sunshine, could you please,
I apologize for that. You can have email address that is going to the board office, and just as the constituent emails and other emails are forwarded to all board members, the same process can take place.
thank you.
Thank you.
And that's regarding to the applications. Ms. Gittens?
Okay, the one thing we're kind of forgetting, that simultaneous to whatever we're doing, we should start the process yesterday looking for the permanent superintendent. So if we are going to do that, if we're going to use an agency to help us with that, not that they're going to choose the interim, but they could also guide us with anything that we need with that process, although we would be doing it. In other words, they're looking for the permanent while we're, doing our part with the interim, but we would be able to bounce off of them if we needed to.
Okay, Mr.
Yes,
Primo?
ma'am, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, Ms. McClellan, I think that was one of the items that we did not get.
Yes, ma'am, that's where I was going. Also, to remind you that that process would probably take more than 2 weeks to get a firm hired to come in. So again, it goes to what timeline you're committed to, knowing that you do have until June 30th to put that interim in place. June 15th, if you're looking at least a 2-week overlap of time. So just some considerations for you. And if you want to go back and have that discussion about a firm or not a firm, this would be the appropriate time to discuss that.
Madam Chair, if I could just add as well, when you're thinking about the firm, some things you need to think about is the opportunity to interview your firm, make sure that you're comfortable with your firm, to know how much it's going to cost, to know what they're able to offer you, their processes, so you can have an in-depth discussion in terms of how you want the public to be involved, what are the steps. So that should be a little bit more of a longer process, because this will be for the permanent superintendent. So you want to make sure that you vet this as much, or the firms as much as possible, and make sure that the board is in consensus as to how to move forward with the permanent. So that I just wanted to add that.
Thank you.
May I just say, but that's why that is the urgent thing. Everyone is saying it's going to take a while. So we need to get on that post haste. That should be our first thing, so that we don't run, past the 30th or past this time.
If you are going to use a firm to hire the interim, then yes, that would be the first
No,
thing.
I'm
If you are
talking
going to
about the
hire the firm for the long-term superintendent, it could be delayed short-term until you have your process for your interim. That's why I think you really need to make the decision now as to whether you're going to use that firm for the interim process, for the interim short-term superintendent.
But I don't understand why that would determine whether we would hire a firm to look for the permanent.
It wouldn't, but right now, we're talking about the interim superintendent process. And considering that that's the first person that needs to be hired, if you're not going to use the firm to hire that person, then we can put that off till the next meeting. Right now, this meeting is to determine the interim superintendent process. And then you would have some time to look at firms before the next meeting, to get a process in place to talk about what the process is, to decide upon those firms that you want to interview, and all of that. And that could certainly take place between now and the next meeting.
Yeah, but I'm sorry. I just think we're dragging this out. If we go from meeting to meeting, 2 weeks in between, we're looking at the whole future of this district. And we spent 4 hours last night and 3 or 4 hours 2 weeks ago to talk about bathrooms. This is the most important thing that we're going to do. So I'm just saying, if we have to have another special meeting or whatever, we need to expedite this process to
We
get
could
it.
certainly set up additional meetings, but I still believe the first decision needs to be, are you going to use a firm to hire your interim superintendent, so that we can continue this process?
Ms. Morgan?
I agree. I think that the point that we're missing here is that for the permanent superintendent, we're looking at a 6 to 9 month search. We're not looking at something that is around the corner. So it's not imminent. We can take the time to do the interim, and then as soon as we've got that process rolling, then we can start on the other process. But it's not, I don't think the permanent superintendent is as time critical.
Madam Chair,
Yeah. So if Mr. Pre?
if I may just add, taking care to hire the interim who will be here for 6 to 9 months is very important, because as soon as they are in place, they are the superintendent.
Correct.
So it's just like you're hiring a permanent superintendent, even though we know that they're a placeholder. So you do have to put that attention in there, because they will be the acting superintendent.
Thank you. So can we, Ms. Patrica?
And just so I can get some clarification, if we were to hire a firm, they would help facilitate board discussions surrounding what qualifications we were looking for in that interim, whether those qualifications are met in the applications that come in. They would be like the guide on the side that would help us through that process.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And there are some some articles out there. There is also an article from the Greater City Schools that lists the process for looking for a superintendent. There are many firms that are available to do that. So generally, you can decide what services you require of those firms. And if you prefer them to come in and meet individually or meet as a board and discuss what are those characteristics that you're looking for in any superintendent, whether it's a short-term or long-term, they would facilitate that process. They would also facilitate the process for community input. So, you would decide, and of course, price would vary. Anywhere I've seen from $20,000 to $100,000 for that search, just depending on the services that you're requiring. Of course, if you use them for both a short-term and long-term, that would obviously increase the cost. So lots of things to consider.
We don't need to decide today what the job qualifications are going to be, what the job description is going to be, what the length of the contract is going to be. We don't need to decide any of that today. We just need to decide whether we're going to hire a firm, and then the firm will come in and help us reach consensus on those items, right?
Yes, and if you're not going to hire a firm, then you need to decide on the rest of the process. Yes, so today is really all about process.
Good, thank you.
Thank
Right,
you.
so right now, what we're trying to determine, okay, if we can continue on to the next piece, is as far as the SEEK-IN application. So I believe that everybody wants applications. So what does that process look like to us? How are we receiving those applications is our next.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. The thing that the board needs to decide at this time, I believe that what Ms. McClung is waiting for is, are you going to move forward with the firm for the interim, or are you going to develop an internal process for the interim? That's the direction that
Yes,
she's.
ma'am, that's
she's-
the
Oh, I'm
decision
sorry,
we
I
need.
thought we did that.
We need to decide if, are you going to hire a firm or are you going to do your own process?
Okay, so
For the interim, I'm sorry, just for the interim.
Ms. Vaughn, is that what you were going to say?
Well, yeah, I thought we had determined,
I did too, so I'm with you on that one. But
Which,
I mean,
was there a consent, did I miss a consensus around that?
we went and there were two that wanted, now I'm confused.
I'm confused too.
Because I know we all went around to speak on it, and then we got to Ms. Gittens, and she was speaking about a firm.
So if we could do another consensus,
Okay,
just to be
thank
sure, so that we have clarity around that.
Thank you. So can I please have consensus that we are doing, and we're going to do this internal without a firm for the interim superintendent's placeholder position? Thumbs up, please.
I don't know what that looks like. I'm sorry, but I don't have any idea what that looks like. Can somebody tell me what that looks like?
That looks like they do their
We're
application.
going to be doing the
Review
process.
them.
Who helps us decide what the job qualifications are going to be, what the term of the contract is going to be?
Okay,
How
so
do we come to that conclusion?
go ahead,
So
Ms. Fisher?
Florida statute 1001.51 determines what the responsibilities of the superintendent are. So that would apply to the interim superintendent that we would be hiring. I had a question in regard to Mrs. Gittens' board control thing. I don't know how we do this work without staff. I mean, honestly, I don't know how we do this work without staff.
Well,
I mean-
and Ms. McClung was just making the point that there are resources and all of that show us basically, and don't forget, we've got the superintendent's job description. We've
Correct.
got his evaluation. We've got everything right there that shows us. So, we pick out, everyone has a section, and you ask these questions, or we all ask the questions, or whatever. I mean, it's
I know that,
right
but-
there for
but
us.
doing
And I-
the-
If there is now consensus around that internal process, we could start developing that. We could work on that now. So in terms of what staff might be needed, you may need staff in terms of getting the advertisements out there. So what, would you like that to go through HR in terms of advertising? Would you
Let's
like to
finish
hire
the-
an external?
Ms. McClung, I just want to make sure, as far as the last consensus, the only person that Ms. Patrica, we need to see where you're at on that.
I'm sorry, I don't think we can do this internally. I don't think that we as a board can guide each other through this. I think we need an external guide. That's just sort of the sense that I get from the conversations we're having. Perhaps, Ms. Morgan, there's something I'm not understanding.
No, actually, you just gave me a thought. We don't have to hire a firm. All we have to do is hire a local consultant who can help us walk through this process.
That's all I need is a guide on the side. That's it.
Yeah.
That's all I need.
It doesn't have to be an internal person, it can be an external person, and
Somebody who can objectively help us reach consensus. Because we as a board, I don't think can get there alone.
Okay, thank you for that. Ms. Vaughn?
No, I agree. If we feel that we need somebody extra, just a consultant, that would be easy enough. That would be easy enough to do. The reason I do not want to involve staff outside of our board is there's conflict of interest there. Because we're going to undoubtedly have staff members applying, and there's a conflict of interest. And I think this is our hire. We should have control of it. And we should select, if we need to, an outside consultant. I was wondering if there are any individuals in RSM that do anything like this, that I know they,
Well,
review.
FSBA does, I mean.
Right, FSBA does.
We are. Ms. Morgan?
so is that Marshall?
Yes.
Marshall, Mike Martin, does he have a chief of staff or an HR person, or do you know from your experience as a foundation executive director whether there is someone out there that locally that would be able to do something like this?
A lot of names come to mind. To answer your question directly about FGCU, they had a chief of staff. She just retired.
Oh.
Susan Evans, who had been with them since the beginning of the university. Whether she's available to help with that, that's another issue.
Well, I was just, I'm sure there are people.
Well, and I know that, well, you just said FGCU, they do have a process, and they have a group that they pull together to bring in hires, and they sit around the round table, kind of like what we're doing, to have the people come in and they interview them and they go through the whole process. So I know that they have a process in place for hirees for just about all of their people there.
Well, let me clarify. I'm not looking for somebody to do the job. I'm just looking for somebody to lead us,
Correct.
to help. So we're not dependent on any internal staff. It's somebody from the outside who's a professional that we are comfortable having us, coaching us.
Got you. Ms. Gittens?
Okay, one of the things I'd also like to see is a timeline. If we are looking 9 months down, then at this point, we need an interim. At this point, we hire a firm. At this point, we need to do these applications. And Lauren, I'm sorry, I'm not giving you another job to do. But I just think, but I am. But, a timeline, because it helps us to stay on track, to say, well, by this time, we need this. And if we're up on that deadline, and do we need to move it, or do we need to speed up what we're doing? So that is another thing I was going to say, a timeline. I don't think it's as difficult doing the process of selecting an interim as it could be. We have, if nothing else, if we got the process from our internal HR on paper or sent to us, and then we just follow through what do they do when they hire someone at this position level. And we have their caveat. It's just that they're not processing and accepting applications and going through them. We are. But they already have a process in place. So
And then,
So you could certainly meet with HR to determine that.
give us the process that they use for upper level, positions. What did they do? I mean, I was on the superintendent search committee. So what did they use for that? Just give us the paperwork.
and that will come into play when we do the the superintendent, the long-range one for.
Well, the
a permanent one.
short-term, Ms. Patrica was saying the short-term one, not knowing what we need to do, and I'm saying we have processes in place.
Ms. Patrica?
So as I look at this consensus list, do we want to hire a firm to help hire the interim or develop an internal process? 6 yeas, 1 nay. Which one? Were the 6 yeas to hire a firm or were the 6 yeas for an internal process?
They were for an internal process.
Okay, so I can live with that if we hire a consultant as a guide on the side.
Okay, so that would bring another consensus around hiring a consultant to guide the process.
Okay, so do we have,
So there was an agreement, there were it was 6 to 1, that it would be an internal process. And Ms. Patrica has said that she would be willing to agree to that internal process to bring hers to a yes, but she's putting out the idea that a consultant would be hired to guide that process. So that's the discussion now.
thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Giovanelli?
So, as I sit here, I'm like, this is going to be a very long process. I don't see it being expedited in any way. I mean, there's so many people in the community right now that could help us, and we just need somebody to stabilize the district, make all the employees and staff feel comfortable while we hire a superintendent that will be permanent. I have several names that come to mind, and I'm just going to say it. There's Dr. Santini. I know that he would come back and help. I know there's a Dr. Bell that he would come back and help. I know Dr. Browder would come back and help. And I know there's more people out there than that. Let's just get this job done, and we can hear what the people have to say about those individuals. I think that we're making this way harder than it needs to be. I think that we just need to move forward and to keep mulling this over and show that our dysfunction is really not helping the district.
Madam Chair, there was discussion around a timeline. I did go back and...
Excuse me, I'm not done.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were finished.
No, I'm not.
Sorry, Ms. Giovanelli. Please continue.
I'm sorry, have we?
Excuse me.
Wait.
Wait.
Point of order.
I'm not done.
If I may. I believe we have reached consensus for an application process.
Yes.
And the comments right now are in directly against the consensus that we have reached regarding an application process.
I just think we're wasting a lot of time.
Not to throw names out there, and now we're throwing names out. So, point of order, please.
Thank you. Ms. Giovanelli, did you have any other comments?
No.
Thank you. Sorry, Ms. McClung?
In light of both of those comments around the timeline, I had gone back and just looked at dates if we were looking for an interim superintendent, and did put together a very broad-based timeline for an interim superintendent, which we can share if you would like to see that, just looking at when certain things would have to happen if you wanted someone in place by the 30th or if you wanted someone in place by the 15th. Perfect. So certainly happy to share that with you.
Thank you.
If you take a look up here, it's being brought up.
I don't have access.
Up at the top there where it says 100%.
Madam Chair,
Yes, please, Ms. Fisher?
why don't we have a 5-minute break?
Yeah, I'm sorry, can we go ahead and just have a 5-minute break so everybody can kind of like
Don't say
regroup,
what we can't.
please?
And then we can also email this to you in case you can't see it, and that way you'll have some time.
Thank you.
That's great.
Because I don't get
So I can see where we are, please. So did we not reach consensus on that last question?
No, so we have not reached consensus on
back
whether or
on.
not to hire a consultant. So I did email the timeline. Again, this timeline it's certainly not set in stone. It's based upon currently scheduled board meetings. So if you have a chance to look at that, just keeping those dates in mind as you're talking about these processes, that if you wanted to have some overlap time with the superintendent, then you would need to hire that, you would have to approve that contract by June 8th in order to have a June 15th start date based upon current scheduled board meetings. If you did not want an overlap time, then the hiring would need the contract would need to be approved on June 22nd in order for them to start on July 1. So these are just some dates to keep in mind as you talk about your process. The last item that we were discussing was there was a consensus with a 6-to-1 to use an internal process. And Ms. Patrica had mentioned that she was amenable to an internal process if a consultant could be used to guide that process. So the discussion now is around whether or not to hire a consultant, and then we would like to have a consensus around that topic. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Ms. Patrica, we already heard from you. Ms. Fisher, on the possibility of a consultant.
Yes, I think that would be very helpful if we're not using any internal staff.
Thank you. Ms. Gittens?
Okay, I'm confused again, which is where
Okay,
I live.
we're on, if we're going to do an internal process without staff, do we want to have a outside consultant?
This is
assist
consultant,
us?
yes, I'm fine with that.
Thank you. Ms. Vaughn?
The word outside consultant is in that, yes.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. Ms. Morgan?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Giovanelli?
I don't think we need it, no.
Okay, so then, can we just go ahead and do consensus, thumbs up, even though we've heard it, on do we want an outside consultant to assist us? 6 to 7. Thank you.
6 to 7.
Oh, 6 to 1. We're already done.
It's been one of those days, I understand, thank you. So now there is consensus
Six out of 7.
around, yeah, too many Cs, consensus around hiring an external consultant. So the rest of that,
Can I go back and change my nay to a yay on the previous one? Because I'm comfortable with an internal process, as long as we have that consultant. So I'd like that to reflect 7.
thank you. Thank you. So the next process normally would be to talk about that interim superintendent process, but since you're going to hire a consultant, they will actually lead you through that process. So we don't need to continue that today. What we do need to continue today is what is the process for hiring the consultant? And so let's start with, when would you like that consultant to be brought on board?
Okay, I'm going to start with,
Me too.
start with Ms. Morgan.
Well, I'd like the consultant to be brought on board as soon as possible. I mean, it's entirely possible, if we want, we could throw out names or suggestions this afternoon and then direct someone to contact people to see if they are available, what their availability is. I don't know what to say.
So ASAP.
Okay, so maybe that was the wrong question, because I think it's become very evident you do want this to happen as quickly as possible. So perhaps the question is, do you have suggestions today, or do you need time to gather some information about different consultants that may be available?
I'm going back to Ms. Morgan.
So, there is one person who's been involved with a lot of governments locally, who has guided them through strategic planning processes and things like that, and that's Joe Mazurkowitz. So he's a possibility. And then I chatted briefly with Marshall, and he suggested that this, the former chief of staff at FGCU might be appropriate. And I think, I would just be looking at large organizations who go through this process. So that's what made me think of FGCU and then Lee Health. I don't know whether they have someone who helps them with this, but those would be the suggestions I would throw out.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Ms. Vaughn?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, maybe even Chico's, because I know they've done, any of the large organizations, they might even be able to do it for us free. It's a community
Did you
service.
say free?
I said, free. What's the word, the pro bono, isn't that what attorneys, would that be applicable to a consultant that's,
If they choose to do that.
I'm sorry?
If they choose to do that, they
No,
want to
we
work
could-
pro bono, provide
We
public
can
service.
see, hey.
Ms. Gittens?
Okay, well, I know that FGCU has departments that, like with small business and all that, they help you with things like this as a part of a community process. Prior to that, though, I think before we get a consultant, that we should do what I mentioned before and get from HR, what is the process that you already have in the books, just for having it there as a starting point. What do you use for hiring positions to give us a place to start? And then we look at that, and if we have, I'm looking at the consultant thing, it's just if we have questions, but it should be simple to say this is the process for hiring this position. We look at the questions and say we want this one, we don't want this one, and we've got somewhere to start from.
Thank you.
I don't think that we need to just go to them and say, okay, what do we do next? We need to go to them with, this is the plan we looked at. Do you see anything plus or minus on this?
So I'm sure we can get that from HR without a problem. So that should be easy. So did
Best
you have
practices?
specific recommendations for, you said someone that helps small business? Was there a specific name, or were you referring to a specific company?
I do, you mean at FGCU?
Is that where it was? Was it FGCU?
That's where it was.
Okay, thank you. I missed that
do
piece.
have a name of
Thank you.
someone out there, but I don't have it on the top of my head. I'll have to get it to you.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Fisher?
Well, I know that BJM Consulting, Joe Mazurkowitz, has been active with our sales tax and has some familiarity with the district, and he is a very popular consultant locally.
Who is that, please?
Joe Mazurkowitz,
Mazurkowitz.
BJM Consulting. So there are some business management consulting corporations in Lee County, and I'm just not really familiar with them at this point. I also know that sometimes the county commission uses consultants for that kind of thing, so they may have some suggestions also.
Thank you. Ms. Patrica?
Mike, help me say his last name at Lee Health.
Welch.
No,
No.
Marshall said Wookich.
Oh,
yeah.
Their HR VP, their VP of HR. Yeah.
Really, as I look at your executive board, I'm thinking any one of them. But he's HR, so he's going to have that process. And he's got at least one child in our system, so he would have a personal stake in the outcome.
Okay. And Ms. Giovanelli?
yes, I'm going to pull my vote for the application process. I think this is being too complicated. When you have an employee that resigns in the middle of, before evaluations, and everything that was going on regarding the poster and the code of conduct that wasn't done appropriately, I think we're negligent to keep that person in our system. So I'm not going to support any of this today. I mean, we send employees home, and they get paid until their contract runs out, because that's what's best for the district. And so I don't agree with this process, and I'm pulling my vote regarding the applications. I think this is a process that needs to happen immediately, And I'm going to stand by that. I said that 2 weeks ago, and I'll say it again.
So, Ms. Stillwell, would you remind us what that vote will be, what that consensus vote would be with that one changed?
6-1.
So it will now be 6 yea, 1 nay, so we will continue then with the application process. Thank you. So I've heard several names or suggestions around the way to, around consultants. So the next point would be, how will the board, since this will be a board process, how will the board reach out to those? Which of you will be doing that, and what will be your timeline for bringing things back to the board in terms of applications or in terms of presentations? How would you like to go about that?
Ms. Gittens?
See, I agree with Ms. Giovanelli in one way. We're making it way too complicated. I think that the process that we already have internally on paper is basically all we need to get started, and that if there was, if we have questions or whatever about it, then we should be able to call someone. But I don't see formally, going through the process of getting someone or whatever. I don't think it's that difficult for the interim. We have the process in place. We're all intelligent people. We know how to do an interview. We've done it before. So we just do an interview. I just don't think it's that complicated. And I'm worried about if we're deciding who's going to be the consultant, and then how do we get in touch with them, and then what is the parameters of what, let's just do it. So.
Okay, Ms. Morgan?
Let's see, now I've just forgotten my thought.
Sorry.
Oh, dear. Well, I would say two things. First of all, I think that we can go ahead and ask for applications. Oh, I know what my second thought was. That's why I lost it. I didn't want to share it. My second thought is that we can't function as a board without somebody guiding us. Right now, we have 3 people working with us from staff, and we are struggling to get through this conversation. So we need somebody to help us. Now, we can ask for applications, we can get that ball rolling, but we need someone to help us do our rubric or prioritize what it is that we expect of an interim. So, sorry about that thought, but
Thank you. Ms. Fisher, did you have something you were going to add?
No, I think I'll save it.
So I would go back to who will be contacting these people that you have suggested in order to narrow that list or to bring back names.
I think traditionally that's the board chair, right? Doesn't traditionally the board chair facilitate that?
If I have the contact information, I will certainly call them and invite them to our next meeting, if that's what everybody wants to do. No?
Can I just say one more time? Why don't we look at what we have to work with? I'm sure that there's an existing rubric, there's an existing process. If we just ask HR to send it to us, we all look at it, see if there's any issues that we see on it. I mean, what questions could we have that we would need someone outside to answer if we have everything right there? The only difference would be someone might say, okay, well, I don't think this question should be, or it should be changed. I really think that we are able and capable of doing that.
Well, and
Ms.
I
Gittens.
think, because we were looking at, I'm sorry, Ms. McClung, we were looking at, how like we had completed the search and the interviews of the attorneys, but I think we did get the assistance from staff in putting that together for us and then giving it back to us for us to decide on who we were going to have, and then the conversation happened. But they did put that, there was someone else who put that together for us. I just wanted to remind.
We can do it ourselves.
There was agreement that you would hire an outside consultant, that there was a consensus upon that. And so to move the process along, we also, there's agreement that we will ask HR for their process. What I would like clarification around is, do you want their process for any hire or specifically for a superintendent hire, which the last one would be over 5 years old? Which is fine. I mean, it's just, I just need to know which process you're asking for.
Thank you. Ms. Vaughn?
All right. Let's cut this to the chase here. How about a consultant on call to answer any questions we have? And Ms. Gittens, you've done a 180 because just a little while ago you were saying we need a firm, but anyway, I'm glad you did.
But for the permanent.
We write down, we have, here's the job description for superintendent. Here's our time frame. Here's, we have to also make a decision of salary range. If somebody's applying, if you're going to apply for a job, just think of this. If you're going to apply for a job like this, what do you want to know? You want to know a salary range. You want to know, well, what do I have to do? What are my hours? What am I expected to do? Again, interim superintendent is the superintendent, so he or she would need to go to community meetings. I think that needs to be laid out, although probably most of the applicants will have a pretty good idea of what this entails. Cover letter, resume. Let's say we get 10 applicants. Why do we even need, can we not, instead of let's grade 1 to 5 for all of these, I think we can pretty much look at the resumes and maybe even just put them in order. Come up with the top 5. At that point, if there are external people, we will need to, before we make a decision, make sure that person's not a felon, or a child molester. I'm exaggerating, but the fingerprint and the background check, we will need help with that, obviously. We could use our own HR on those things. Then we do interviews. And I think isn't that kind of what we did? We had the resumes for the board attorney. They were narrowed down, and I think, didn't we do it that way? Did we?
Yes.
To narrow it down, and then we narrowed it to the final 3.
Yes.
And we had group interview, and we had individual. And at that time it was only at that time that we did individual scoring, because it's only at that time, once we get the final 3, let's say, that we're going to have little head knocking or whatever it is we do. Can we not just make it that simple? Get the resumes in, get them, and I would suggest not emailed resumes, that we have our secretaries do hard copies. So we each have a hard copy. We have 10 of them. We put them 1 to 10. We get somebody, we can have one of our secretaries do it, or Ms. Jordan and I can sit down and do it, or 2 of you can do it. Tell me the objections to a process that simple. So that's what I have to say.
And I thank you very much for those comments, Ms. Vaughn. Ms. Patrica?
Is that the appropriate process to hire an interim leader of a $2 billion corporation? I am not an HR specialist. As I look around me, I don't see any HR specialists. I've never done this before. I need professional guidance. We have agreed to professional guidance. The fact that we're backing off of the consensus we've already made is proof positive of the need for the entire board to have professional guidance. This is not, I don't have a favorite. I don't care who it is. I just need someone to come in and help us work through this process.
Ms. Giovanelli?
Please.
Ms. Giovanelli?
last time when they just did an interim, that which turned out to be a permanent, was done just how we did it, not, I mean, how they did it. And I mean, the only thing is they left out a board member that I didn't think was correct. I mean, I even sent you an email regarding that. But other than that, this is just an interim. The real process needs to happen at the pace of everything y'all are talking about. But this short-term interim, we just need somebody to come in and keep the train moving. And that's what needs to happen here. We're wasting time. And I'm going to tell you, we are going to upset the community worse if we don't act as a board and do what's right for this district that is needed desperately. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. And I just want to say too, I don't know if I would consider it wasting time, because we want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to say what they are feeling or what's on their thought process. So to me, that's really important, because that's the main thing, is that everybody does have an opportunity to speak on their, what they believe.
Honestly, I agree with you on that, and we need to have the conversation, but honestly, it looks very well scripted, and to be interrupted by staff to throw off my train of thought is not fair to me for my district too. So I just don't agree completely.
Thank you. And I don't think it was any intention on, the ladies came because we asked them to come. There's nothing scripted about anything. We asked them to come to facilitate this meeting for us. And so they were gracious enough to come and do this. I know when you paused, truthfully, I thought you were done as well.
We're done too.
So I apologize for that, and I know Ms. McClung would never do that to anyone. So I
Happened
just,
to me before, so thank you.
that's our opinion, but thank you. So can we did have consensus on a consultant. So if we can please move forward, and how do we want that to look? As I said already, if Ms. Vaughn, as she already stated, she and we could split this up and make the phone calls to try to get a consultant in here, whatever it is for the board's wishes.
I'm sorry, but I did ask a question. How would Ms. Fisher called Dr. Atkins then? So, I mean, that process, that was done, there was nobody had resumes and so forth. So that's my point.
Point of order, we have reached consensus to not throw names out. We have reached consensus to go through an application process.
Yes, we have. Thank you. And we will move forward to our next step, which is who will contact the potential consultants. Ms. Morgan?
Mary had her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Fisher?
Well, I'm confused right now, because we've had multiple conversations and we make a decision and then we back up on it. But I would like to understand, if we're going to get applications, are we going to place an ad? Are we going to advertise through other social media avenues? I mean, how are we doing that? And how broad is this going to be? Because, I mean, we do have, a time certain of at least 2 months, okay? So are we going to hire the consultant first? Or are we going to do it ourselves, and you guys are going to, I mean, I'm just confused about what exactly the process is.
I think the biggest thing
I
is,
think we need to take it one step
Yes,
at a
ma'am.
time, make a decision, agree to it, and then move on to the next step, because it's already 3:25. We're scheduled till 4. I understand we can go over, but we are not making progress here. And I want our staff to know that I appreciate their hard work, and I trust them implicitly. Of course, people have conflicts of interest, invested interest, when they've spent their entire professional life in one organization.
thank you. Mr. Bruno?
Ms. Patrica, could you please explain to me your thought process a little bit about the consultant? What would you like the consultant to do?
So we have a process that's given to us by HR that's 5 years old for the superintendent position. The consultant comes in and helps us to tweak that process and then helps walk us through that process in the role of a facilitator. We've, in my estimation, some accusations have been made of staff today that I don't believe are true, and if we have a consultant from the outside, there's no need for that. There's no reason for anybody to make any accusations about anything. It's an outside person that just wants what's best for the district. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm the guide on the side to sort of help hold our hand through the process.
And Ms. Morgan, you also, I think, were supportive of that, and I think you had mentioned the consultant. What was your vision for the consultant?
So my thought would be, well, there's two ways. One way is the consultant walks us through beginning to end, using previous board processes. The other is to only bring that person in to facilitate the conversation. And yes.
May I, through the chair?
Please.
The conversation, figuring out the process is a conversation where I feel like we need the consultant to help us.
Well, then.
Listen, I'm pointing the finger at myself too. Like, I'm as much a part of this board and as much a part of the dysfunction that's occurred up to this point. I'm just trying to figure out a way for the dysfunction to stop so that we can come together. I didn't come here with names. I didn't come here with a desired result other than this on all issues we decide. That's it. I want us to find a way to move forward.
Mr. Pre-Bruno?
So, Ms. Vaughn, I think I heard you say that perhaps have a consultant as needed. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, I said on call as needed.
Okay. So it sounds like from the individuals that I just talked to, you're looking for someone to help facilitate the process, someone to help you move forward, and I think Ms. Vaughn was saying as needed. Could you perhaps define what that consultant will do, and perhaps that will help you kind of get past this point? What exactly you want the consultant to do, which is to help facilitate the meetings, help facilitate the process in terms of helping you secure the resumes and bringing it forward to you. Am I getting that correct? Is that pretty much what you're looking for?
Yes.
Ms. Vaughn?
Yes, that's what I would be looking for.
So if we're defining it, I don't think everybody's off, everybody's pretty much on the same page. You did decide to have the consultant. Now, am I correct that everyone is on agreement in terms of what that consultant will do?
Ms. Gittens?
I mean, I think we're just going from A to Z. We get the process from HR that they use. HR advertises. We get the applications, we look at them, put them in order of what we think, who's 1, 2, 3, and 4. We get a consensus as to the top ones, then we get together and discuss it like we did on everything else. I don't know what else is necessary in this urgency of moving forward to get an interim.
Madam Chair,
Ms.
is it fair to say that you will require someone to help facilitate the discussions? I don't think the board, the 7 of you, can have a discussion as you're, reviewing these resumes. You're going to have disagreements as to who's at this point, that point. You're probably going to want to have someone to facilitate that discussion, and I'm not sure if staff is the appropriate individuals to help facilitate that discussion.
And at that point, that's fine. But I'm saying expeditiously to start with the process, the advertisement can go out, we get the information, we look at it, we ask for applications. We've got everything laid out. Even if it is older, we've got the information. Even if it's from 5 years ago when we did the application, the generic part is there. So we get that, we look at it individually and say, well, I think this should be added or that should be taken away. It's just that simple. And then, we put it all together in one form.
I understand that it seems like a very simple process, but with the way that the board's going to need some help with facilitating the process.
Right, and I said, yes.
Okay.
Once we do 1, 2, 3, 4, when we have our final ones, then we have a facilitator.
So is it possible to move forward with the, getting the resumes and starting that while you're looking for or securing a consultant to help you facilitate the rest of this process?
I just don't want it to hold up us.
So there's no reason you can't do two things at one time. So you can get the resumes to start it going while you get the facilitator to help you move it forward.
And Ms. McClung, she has something to say as well.
Yes, ma'am. I just wanted to let you know that Dr. Pruitt has sent the hiring process to the chair and to the board attorney and to me so that we do have that in place. And my suggestion was actually going to be what Ms. Dupree-Bruno just mentioned, that if we could talk about the process for hiring this consultant. In the meantime, we could ask HR to go ahead and do the advertising so that you could begin getting those resumes in. So and we have a very short time left today, if we could talk about what you want from that consultant and agree that the chair and vice chair would make some calls and get some information about that to bring back, then we could talk about what information HR might need in order to place that advertisement.
Well, I think the advertisement you're speaking on for the interim, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Not for the consultant.
For the interim.
Right.
Yes, so that you could begin getting those resumes in while you went through the process of hiring your consultant.
Correct. Ms. Morgan?
So I think if we're going to advertise, we have to have an idea of salary and we have to have an idea of term. So I will throw out that I think the term needs to be 6 to 9 months, perhaps 6 months with monthly extensions, depending on where we are in the process. And then in terms of salary, I think on a monthly base, just divide the current superintendent's salary and do it on a, pro rata, the current superintendent's salary. And that's what I'm throwing out for discussion.
Thank you. Ms. Vaughn?
Did we reach consensus on the last question?
No, we're going to skip it and come back.
Yeah, we're coming. Ms. Vaughn?
Oh. That makes sense.
We're on advertising.
Ms. Morgan said makes sense on the term. I mean, it's what I said earlier when I was saying, let's cut to the chase. We have the description of the job, and that interim will be the superintendent and has to fulfill those. In terms of salary, I don't know, we can possibly even just do a range, because there's going to be things that our current superintendent has, some extra bells and whistles that we're not going to provide for an interim. Very, very specifically, we must include what we decided on, that this person is temporary, interim, and it cannot apply for a permanent position, because that's gonna, that's gonna determine
Thank you.
things, but-
Ms. Gittens?
I remember I asked the superintendent at one point, I guess it was a couple weeks ago, about the salary for an interim. And he said that when he was selected as interim, he got his current salary that he was making at that time. So I would, when we get to that piece, I would say if there is a range, it would be the entering, range of that. But in the past, they didn't, raise it up. But that was what he said, that he got his current salary for those, 3-5 months, whatever it was.
That would that be percent of
Thank you for that.
base salary?
Without all of the bells and whistles,
I mean,
like
on
you
the
said.
typing?
Thank you for that. That makes sense versus what it is at this current time. Ms. Dupree-Bruno?
Ms. Gittens, is the term okay of 6 months with monthly extensions?
Yeah, in fact, I was going to say, thank you, Ms. Morgan, I do like that, the 6 months, and then month to month from there on. And in the contract cancelable, we can end it at any time.
Thank you. Ms. Fisher?
No comment.
No comment? Ms. Patrica?
Live with all of it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Morgan.
Ms. Giovanelli?
I agree completely with Ms. Morgan.
Thank you. Okay, so, and I agree with that as well. So, thank you, Ms. Morgan. So would you like a consensus on that then?
Please, and actually, I would like a consensus on the two separate pieces, first the term and then the salary.
Okay.
Thank you.
So based on the term, which was six-month contract with monthly extensions. Are we agreeing upon that? Yes, 7-0. Okay, and then.
Hey, we did it.
That was all straight up. And then the next consensus would be the salary at the, I guess the
Base of the
range
superintendent.
for superintendent, not the current superintendent's. That's what we need clarification on that. It's not the current superintendent's rate of pay. It would be whatever the
Is there a
the
range
base
for the
pay.
superintendent?
Do we have that?
209.
209? Oh. This
What
for sure
where
is
does
a
that number
wealth of
from?
information. Could you, what was the base, please, Ms.
I think it
Fisher?
was 209 is the
From what?
base.
The base pay was 209.
Currently.
For
Oh,
whom?
currently.
Oh, currently,
Oh,
yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because it says, yeah, I thought it was a percentage of the superintendent's base salary, which is currently, were you talking about his current salary?
Yeah, I said current salary, but other people were saying that they think there's a salary range for superintendents, and they were looking at the bottom of the range, so I don't,
And HR would
clear to
have
me.
that information.
So that would be an HR question then.
It's usually a negotiated contract, I mean, yeah.
I will go for a percentage of the superintendent's base salary,
Okay.
put that out.
So looking at what Ms. Morgan just said, a base percentage of the superintendent,
No, a percentage
Percent
of,
of the base.
percentage of,
The
I'm trying to
base.
write and talk at the same time. A percentage of the superintendent's
salary.
base salary as it stands right now. Negotiate it with HR.
Because it doesn't, sorry.
Ms.,
we're not allowed to use HR.
they have to negotiate the pay. HR has to negotiate.
Oh. I
No,
thought
we're going to
Ms. Gittens
set it.
said no out.
The board attorney normally would negotiate the contract, but the board would set the range.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Okay, let me rephrase. A percentage of the base pay of the current superintendent to be offered, to be negotiated
Board attorney.
by the board attorney. Ms. Dupree Bruno.
So I need a little bit more clarity when you say a percentage. Are we talking about 50%, 75%, 45%, 35%? I'm going to need a range. At least give me a range.
Or rate the 209 out 12 months, then what that is, 8 months, right?
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
Prorated by the month.
all right, that sounds good.
So do we have consensus on that?
Yeah.
Ooh, 2 times in a row.
Ms. Patrica? Okay,
Thank you. So we now have consensus around the salary range and also around the term of the contract. Yes,
Yeah, would we need to put in, because things about pension, like the FRS is
Short
but
of a term.
not that the person would get it, but that that's not part of this contract.
what I would suggest is that with these two big pieces, that the next step would be for the chair and vice chair perhaps to meet with someone in HR and determine what needs to go in for that advertisement, what information because they know that process. I'm not familiar with that process, and they would know exactly what needs to be in that advertisement before it could go out.
Okay, but I wouldn't want to, because I know, the current superintendent has extra things that have been negotiated.
Sure.
And whereas I'd be fine with the full current base salary prorated, we're not looking to add special pensions or even, any of those things. Now, the person would probably need, I don't know, does the superintendent, now, he doesn't have his own district vehicle, it's just by mileage, right?
Correct.
Okay, so that would be included mileage.
He can use a district vehicle when he visits schools. I believe there's, and I pulled his contract up, but I didn't look at that. I believe that there is something that if he chooses to use his personal vehicle, he is paid
Mileage or,
I believe, but I'm not positive on that. Again, I think that those types of things might be within the purview of the board attorney when they're negotiating that contract, that you all would have that conversation with her. In terms of being ready to advertise, I believe the big things that would be needed for it to go out would be the range and the length of the contract, and then maybe some line about other items to be negotiated, so that they would understand that, a personal vehicle and like health insurance, those kinds of things.
My point was, though, that this wouldn't be the same kind of negotiated contract that we would have for somebody that we're looking to have permanently for years, that we would just say, this is your salary, you get mileage or a car, it does not, I don't know what the ruling would be on FRS. If it's somebody who's already in our system, they're already enrolled. If it's somebody who has not been an educator or perhaps is retired, they wouldn't, if they're already collecting it, they wouldn't be eligible. I just think when you place an ad for this level position, you have to have delineated, what do I get? This is a...
Insurance and benefits, those types of.
Yeah,
Yes, ma'am.
that sort of thing. So I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but
Vaughn,
I don't really want to see it as a big negotiation.
Right.
Here it is, take it or leave it. That's how I feel about it.
We have Mr. Bruno.
So just a couple of things. There are we have prior contracts that we can refer to that were for interim, so we'll take a look at that.
Okay.
The second thing is, I do not recommend meeting with Ms. Jordan and Ms. Vaughn and HR at the same time, because obviously this is something that's going to come before you for a vote. I would also like to participate in that, so I know what the offer is, what's going out to the public in terms of job description and things like that, so I know the base of the contract that's going to be drafted.
Man, I'm sorry, I meant to say or, Ms. Jordan or Ms. Vaughn, due to sunshine. Thank you.
And Ms. Fisher had her hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it really would depend on the people who apply, whether they're in the system or out of the system, whether they're in FRS or not. And typically what happens is our attorney negotiates on our behalf, and the person who's applying has their own personal attorney for that purpose.
Thank you for that. Ms. Patrica?
Exactly what I was going to say.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ms. McClung?
So I believe the next step then would be with Ms. Jordan or Ms. Vaughn to get with HR and determine what needs to happen in terms for that to be advertised. Is there a date that you would like to have all of those resumes to you, a cutoff date?
I'm going to start with Ms. Giovanelli.
Say the question again, please.
The question is there a date that you would like all the applications completed and sent to us?
Soon, I don't know. I'll wait for the board to see what it is.
Thank you. Ms. Morgan?
I'll start May 21st.
May 21st.
We can meet on the 24th to choose candidates to interview, choose an interim on the 7th, and appoint on the 8th.
Okay, please say 21st, interview on the 24th.
Right? Choose on the 7th, appoint on the 8th.
Of May?
Of June.
June.
Say that again?
Okay, so May 21st, applications in by May 21st, interviews on the 24th,
No, we choose candidates to interview.
on the choose
And then the candidate interviews are scheduled so that we are able to, on the 7th of June, to go ahead and choose and make recommendations for an appointment on the 8th, assuming they would start on the 15th with some overlap. I'm sorry, I forgot you were trying to write that all down.
Okay. I think I got it. So it's, if everybody looks, it's written down there as well, so, okay, so Ms. Vaughn?
Well, I don't have a calendar open in front of me. That doesn't look like a bad timeline, except I would prefer seeing the dates moved up. I think we can get this done a lot sooner. I would like to see this done by, the appointment done before the Memorial Day break.
Before the Memorial Day break?
Yeah, the long weekend we get, I would like to see that.
Ms. Fisher?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that if we go with the timeline that Mrs. Morgan has suggested, that would get us through the graduation weekend,
That's true.
and
We need to do that.
That's it, good, thank you
Well,
for
that's
bringing it to our attention.
true. I hadn't thought about graduations.
Okay, so Ms. Vaughn, were you, thank you for that, Ms. Fisher. Ms. Vaughn?
I mean, I can live with this. I'd rather see it sooner, even if it doesn't get through graduation. But I can live with this, that one.
Thank you. Ms. Gittens?
I think if we get advertisements out and then by next week, it shouldn't be that difficult if they already had the process, oh, I'm sorry, to get them out by next week, if we already have the process in place. I think by the 21st, we should have all the applications. And I don't see why that last week of May, we can't act on that and finish it by the end of May. If we are collecting resumes as we go along or as they come in, we can be reviewing them. And I would just, yeah, I would like to go for the last week in May as our time to review, and then we can go back to do, where is the next month?
And I think, remember, Ms.
And then
Fisher
the
was
first-
talking about the graduations, which are June.
And
Yes,
also,
but
if
what
we're
in
going
June?
to interview, I have to insert that, we have to, if we're going to interview, we have to set aside time, not just to read the applications, but we have to schedule interviews.
Right, and I'm saying the last week in May, schedule the interviews. And graduations are that first week in June? Is that correct?
Yes.
so then there's
Okay,
also
so then-
Memorial Day, and people may have plans. I mean, I'm just trying to think about, not only about our commitments, but also the commitments that other people may have.
But if we tell people now that that last week in May is when we're going to be doing interviews for this position, that's a part of our process, they should know they have a month.
Okay, thank you. And then,
Two.
yeah, I'm going this way. So, Ms. Fisher, I'm just going down so I don't miss anybody. So your comments were, are you good with?
I'm good with the original dates that were proposed.
And then, Ms. Patrica?
I'm good with the original dates that were proposed as well. However, I'd like to ask if we could move our school board, I can't even tell what it is, workshop. I would assume Ms. Morgan, who just left, was talking about making a decision at that workshop for action on the 8th, based on that timeline.
Right.
And as I look at the 7th, I will be driving home from Gainesville for FHSAA like I was yesterday, and I'd prefer to be physically present with y'all. So if we could move that workshop to later in the day.
For 7th.
I would appreciate that. If not, I'll join by phone.
Well, the 7th, I think, Ms. Thomas, is the 7th the ones that we put on there just in case to save? Do you know?
No, the 7th is a school board workshop from 1 to 4.
It's a regularly scheduled date.
That is our scheduled one? Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Can I just ask Ms. Morgan is back? If she said, have the resumes by the 21st, what precludes us from acting on them the following week?
Nothing.
What she has there.
I believe
We
that's
choose
when the interviews are
candidates on the
scheduled under that original timeline. Under that original suggestion, that was the week that,
To interview the candidates?
yes, ma'am, if you look there, it was, they would choose the candidates to interview on the 24th and then schedule those interviews the 25th and through the 6th.
Actual interviews where they come in and speak to all of us.
So the 24th and 25th, we have board meetings, so
That would be
what
something
is the
that we would
9
add.
a.m.? Do you know what the 9 a.m. hold is on Monday? Well,
That's,
never mind.
we put holds on these dates so
Oh,
that
for
way we
for
could
different
have
things.
some dates saved for us to be able to meet.
If we're only going to break it down to like the final 2 or 3, then that could be done the morning of the 25th. Could it not?
Yes, if they're local. If they're external, you may need some additional time.
Well, that's something we didn't discuss, but
So I'm going to finish going back around here.
Yeah, that's a good.
So, Ms. Patrica, you had said that, well, that 1 o'clock meeting is later on the 7th, that we already have.
It is already later?
Well, it's 1 o'clock.
Yeah, but my meeting doesn't end in Gainesville until noon.
oh, that's what you were saying, the 25th?
No. June 7th, based on the original
Oh,
timeline
okay.
suggested by Ms. Morgan, which I agree with, I'm asking if the board could please move that workshop to after 4 o'clock in the afternoon so that I can be physically present. Because when I participate on the phone, I'm able to follow along, but I know you guys don't like to hear me yelling at you. And that's what I feel like I'm doing. I feel like I'm yelling on the phone.
Okay, could you put that, we're putting that down. And then Ms. Giovanelli?
Okay, so
Oh, you know what?
Oh.
Never mind.
Ms. Giovanelli?
Okay, so why are we going to wait a whole month to get applications in? That's a whole month before we even make any decisions. I don't know why it's not a 2-week window. I don't think we need a lot of time. I don't mind the other time frame. However, just for the record of the week of, my daughter has to get out of her dorm in Arizona, so I'm leaving town, and I won't be here for the 24th or 25th meeting, so I won't be able to do anything then, so.
So, okay, so you're gone on,
And that's the weekend of which was also, that's why I figured that is part of that's Memorial Day weekend, so.
and I think that's what Ms. Fisher was saying as well. So,
I've already booked flights because I'm having to drive her back from Arizona, so I don't have a choice. Her dorm, she has to be out of her dorm. Unfortunately, the dates they weren't controlled by me.
right. Ms. Fisher?
So, yes, so we have to get the process from HR. We have to advertise.
Correct.
And then get the applications in. So that's why that length of time. We have to give people an opportunity to get the announcement, to fill out their applications and submit them.
So can I, so Okay, so Ms. Giovanelli, so by the 24th, though, you would have received,
Totally see that.
and you've
Yes, I
already
can,
been able
yes.
to, would have been
Yeah.
able to see it, read it, and make your decision based on that, correct? So the interview part would be really important for you to be a part of that and be here. So what is your date to come? What's your back date?
Well, I'll be here,
End date?
I should be home by the 30th.
Oh, okay, so, okay,
Yeah,
that week.
see.
Okay, I see.
It's going to take me, I have to pack her up
Yep. Got it.
and then drive back.
And see, and this is what's really important, because we want to try to make sure that we accommodate everybody, and that's why it took us this long to get here today. So, because everybody does have things that they have to do, so we really need to make sure that we're
Well,
making
and if
everybody
if the application process was shorter, then I could do interviews prior to. That's, the personal interviews, if we're going to do it that way, or are we going to do them?
backwards.
Yeah, that's my only thought, but.
Okay, so in seeing that, because you leave on the 24th, so,
No, I actually leave the weekend prior, but
the
the weekend.
I'm sorry, like the 21st?
So she's gone the whole week, so.
Ms. Giovanelli?
Oh, I think I think it might be even the 19th or 20th. I think maybe the 20th.
Oh, so that's like 2
I
weeks.
got to look, but I don't, what my reservations are now, because honestly, I don't remember. It was
Yeah,
very
2
difficult to
weeks.
get.
So could we say if we are, where the heck are we now? We're in this is the end of April.
Right, well, and it's
So we're
27th.
in the end of April right now, and it's going to take at least, Ms. McClung, what, a week or so to get all that out and get it into the paper and advertise and then start getting things back. So that takes us to around the 11th, approximately that week of the 11th, when they would all start coming in. And then that following week,
Can I ask a question?
yeah, go
Back
ahead.
it up a couple of days, and if you could look, Ms. Giovanelli, did you say you would be here on the 21st or would not be here on the 21st?
She's saying she's not here on that day.
I won't be here on the 21st. I
First.
think my flight's either
But she will have the ability to read everything.
Yeah, I have my phone. I mean,
Yeah, so we'll send her,
That's-
computer.
One option would, be right now, the interviews are scheduled through June 4th, so they could be set a little bit later to accommodate that, through June 4th. Or you could back up the main one there is that she was not available on the date that you were going to choose candidates to interview. So you could back up your process a few days and ask to have all of the resumes in by, say, the 18th, and set a special meeting to make those choices on the 20th or the 21st, depending on Mrs. Giovanelli's schedule.
she's not sure she's going to be there that whole week. So, I
I'll be
mean,
here.
you could still read
It's either
it
the
and
19th,
tell
the
us.
20th, the 21st. I have to go back and look, so I don't, but don't,
Right. So you'll be able to read and share with us what is needed.
because, I
Okay,
mean,
perfect. So I guess maybe the interview process, because we want to make sure that everybody is there. So if we move that, the 4th, June 4th, nobody's here June 4th?
I'm not in town.
and that starts graduation weekend.
Yes.
Okay.
4th, I believe, is is one of the graduations.
What are we going to get it down to what? 3 people or whatever for the final?
Well, we're trying to figure out a timeline on how,
No, I know that, but the
gonna
time
work-
has to do, in my mind, with how many. If you're only going to have to do, interview 3 people, that's different than having to interview 5. So if we're going to bring it down to the last 3, then, Ms. Giovanelli, what would be the possibility of you doing your individual interviews by Zoom?
I can totally do that. I don't have a problem doing that.
Because then that would kind of keep us on schedule. If you could do yours on Zoom, and in other words, during the week of the 24th, we do all the interviews.
forgot all about
I don't
Zoom.
know. Cindy, how's that looking?
I'm sorry, and Ms. Fisher had a comment to make as
Oh,
well.
sorry.
Yeah, because she would have until the 4th to complete those, so those could be done. I mean, if you did them all that week that Ms. Giovanelli's gone, will you have time within that week to do the interviews, or are you looking at doing Zoom ones when you return? I wasn't clear on that, I'm sorry.
What we were saying is during the week of the 24th that we all, whether we're here physically or not, would do our interviews.
So what day would you make that decision as to whom you wanted to interview?
Well, okay, let's.
'Cause right now
let's
that's
get
set on the
back- let's
24th.
get back on track here. So, Ms. Giovanelli, we know what you have, we know where you're at and where you're not going to be. So we can make accommodations for that to take place via Zoom because we have that new world that we live in. So that would accommodate you on those, on that. But as far as the interviewing, I think we also need to make sure that we have the interviews that, as collective body, we are having them here and we're speaking to them all together. So that's important that everybody's here for those, even though we could do individual ones, so we have in mind where we're at, but then when we come together to speak, we want to make sure that everybody's here for that particular day when they're all here, however many that is. So we need to make sure, like if Ms. Patrica cannot be here on the 4th, then we can move it a day. If Ms. Giovanelli cannot be here, we just need to make sure that everybody is here so we have everybody's voices heard.
So it looks like the 1st through the 3rd then would be your options for that.
Yeah. And then Ms. Fisher, I'm sorry, you
Yeah,
had,
so I know, when will we place the ad?
as
You know, because today is.
quickly as possible.
Yeah, today is April 27th. So if we place the ad by May 7th, if it'll be ready to place, then people have 2 weeks to respond.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the rest.
It's going to
So
take
the-
a week and a
The
half to
group
place the
interview.
ad.
The group interviews,
See, what I'm looking at is the 20, if we have all the applications and everything by the 21st, everybody looks at them, the 21st would be the day that we all decide the ranking order. We take those and look at the top, if we just say 3, and then the following week, we do, if we're going to do individual interviews, or if you decide we're going to do it all together, whatever, that week of the 24th is interview week, whether you do it by Zoom or by person.
I believe that what I understood was that you may choose to do some individual ones, but there would definitely be group interviews, and that week, and that the desire was for everyone to be present for those, and that week of the last week of May, it is not possible for Mrs. Giovanelli to be present, so we were looking at June 1st through 3rd as the dates that might be
you're not here
possible.
when?
I don't get
The
back
4th?
until the 5th.
Oh, you're gone the following week. Okay, I heard the 4th, I didn't realize it was the whole week.
Yeah, I didn't
Okay.
either, okay.
So that would take us into June, and
So can we
We don't
then
have a
say
week.
on the 7th, that we do interviews on the 7th?
You have a hold on there anyway for them to. And when are you coming back? Oh, no, everyone is out, I mean, there's people out on the 5th and the 6th?
That's a Saturday or Sunday. I don't think anybody's coming in here. I mean, I'll come in.
No.
We have graduation.
Oh, did I get down to the wrong? I'm in May.
Yeah, that's a Saturday and
I was
Sunday.
in May instead of June.
the other option is that you could do your interviews the first full week of June, starting on the 7th, and you could set a special meeting to make that appointment if you chose to do that. You wouldn't necessarily have to make the appointment on the 8th.
I'm sorry, repeat that, please?
If you wanted to push your interviews to the week of June 7th, rather than trying to rush them and make that appointment on the 8th, you could set a special meeting to make that appointment if you chose to do that.
Okay, so, may I?
Yes,
So FSBA conference.
yes, I just saw that.
So it would have to be Monday, Tuesday for those interviews.
It would have to be when? I didn't hear
It
you.
has to be Monday and
Tuesday,
Tuesday
7, 8.
because most of us will be gone on the 7th and 8th. And this is what we went through to try to get to today. So you can,
I will call the executive director to FHSAA and tell him I cannot make the meetings on Monday and Tuesday, 7th and 8th. So that frees me up.
so 7th and,
Completely
the
available for those days.
7th and 8th of June would be the recommended time, I think, for everybody. Is that correct? Is everybody good for that? 7th and 8th of June?
Well, again, I go back to how many people. And you're talking about for the actual sit-down where they're here, like we did with the
Yes.
attorney.
Yes.
And we all speak to each one of them. Right?
Little chunks, can we just decide on the
Yeah.
timeline first and then decide on the process?
But I'm trying to find out what you're doing
Okay,
on
so
the
what we're
7th and
doing
8th.
is, okay, so the application, it's going to go out, and the ad will go out. We will get them back, we need to place the ad by the 7th so that we get them back. It gives 2 weeks for them to come back, receive all the applications by the 21st, that's our deadline. Then all of us can start looking at that, because it takes me more than a day to really focus and look at stuff. So, and I'm sure other people need more than a day to accomplish that as well. Then on the 24th, we will then come together again to choose the candidates that we want to interview for the interim position.
I'm sorry, what date did you say we would come together?
The 25th. Well, on the 24th, so between the 25th and 28th, we'll interview individuals. So individually, we will be interviewing them. Some will be by Zoom, some will be in person, so however we can make that happen, we're going to make it, everybody be able to do that. So whatever that looks like, whatever our needs are to accommodate all of us. So that will take place, and then we will come back on the 7th and have an in-person. And if I'm.
Madam Chair, on the 7th and the 8th, the 7th, you do have a workshop at 1 p.m.
Right, but so we can still do something in the morning though?
Yes.
Yes.
Your mornings are clear for the 7th and the 8th.
Yep.
So are you planning to do all of the group interviews in one day? If you were to do 2, that wouldn't be that difficult. If you were to do 3 or to 5, it might be difficult to set them all in one day.
Right. So, and that's what Ms. Gittens was,
Yes.
that was her thought process and her questions too. How many interviews will we do? So I assume
Determine the number of days needed for those interviews.
Right, so if we had 3, it probably would take us 1 day. If we had 5, it would take us the 2 days. So that would be
Suggest 3.
the 7th and 8th. And that would have to be in the morning because we have workshops. So that would be a 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock meetings for both of those days.
Then would there be a time for discussion prior to the action meeting on the 8th, or are you looking at postponing that decision until setting another meeting?
See, I would think, if I may.
Go ahead, Ms. Gittens.
That if we narrow it down to 3, we do 3 in the group interview the morning of the 7th, and the morning of the 8th, we do our discussion.
Okay, that's what I wanted to clarify. Thank
So we are able
you.
to announce it that night.
Yes. Okay. So that sounds like you are limiting to 3 in-person interviews.
I mean, that's my suggestion.
Okay,
It's up
so
to everyone else.
if I may, Ms. Fisher, did you have?
No.
I thought I saw your hand. Okay, Ms. Giovanelli, how many applicants do you want to narrow it down to? 3 or 5?
That's hard to, we don't even know how many we're going to get.
Okay.
I think that's hard to determine.
So based on the applications that we get,
A
then we will come
maximum of
back and
3.
we will have that conversation on,
I guess 3 to 5. I don't, it's hard to say.
okay.
So you may need to come back and set that timeline after you see the number of applications, after maybe the 24th. You could put those tentatively reserved the 7th and 8th, those mornings.
That'd be great.
And then on the 24th, when you narrow the number down and have a final number, then you can decide if you need to add some time to that.
That would be great. Ms. Vaughn?
Yeah, and I think it depends more on how our individual ranking goes, because, if we have 1, 2, and 3, and number 4 is within a half point, a point, very, very close, we'd probably want to go with number 4. I mean, yeah, it just really depends how those rankings go.
No, yeah, that sounds great. So I think if we go ahead and secure those 2 dates, that's something that we could, and then we have the action meeting that night.
Wonderful.
I think, is everybody in agreement of that? The dates and everything? Are we consensus on that, please? Perfect.
Thank you.
7-0.
So in light of the time, my suggestion would be that at this time, you go with the agreements that you have determined today, that your next steps would be that Ms. Jordan or Ms. Vaughn would meet with HR to work on that, on the advertisement so that could go out next week, and that whichever one is not meeting with HR, then perhaps the other one would start contacting consultants so that you would have some consultant names to bring back for discussion at your next meeting, so that person could be on board by the time you begin your interview processes, or even your selection process.
Ms. Gittens?
I didn't hear in the process when we as a whole would get the information from HR so that we can look at it.
That's already been sent to your chair, so she can send it out to
I'll send
everyone
it out to
today.
you. As soon as I find it, I'll send it out to you.
Okay.
I'll send it out to everybody. Ms. Morgan?
I may have missed it, but are board members going to expect to review the advertisement and approve it before it goes out?
Yes.
And
I believe that we should.
Okay.
Probably
So
get the
as soon as that comes, we'll make sure that everybody gets that. And actually, I'll have Ms. Dupree-Bruno send that out. And then that way, they can respond to her.
Thank you.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes, so in regard to that, we're going to get this information from HR, we're going to review it, we're going to create our application or our advertisement. Okay, who's doing the clerical work? Just ask.
we have board secretaries.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. All right, is there a real valid reason why HR just can't do that for us?
Honestly, I believe that HR should be able to do that. That it's not interfering because they're taking directions from us. This is what they do. And so if we have them, actually, they can put it together for us, send it to us. We can then look at what we, if that's what we agree upon, and then we would have them send it out, because at the end, they have to send it out anyway.
Right, and
We're not sending it
that
out.
would be, I mean, that would be a more timely,
It'll be fast.
time-efficient process than all that other work, because we're looking at wanting to get it done, yet we're complicating the process to the point that it's going to take us a lot of extra time.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Ms. Vaughn?
I was going to volunteer to be the one that got with HR, and as a matter of fact, what Ms. Morgan said was exactly what was on my mind, that I bring to HR the things that we have on this list, and then if there are things that needed to be added or possibly omitted, that with whoever normally does the write-ups, that I work through it with that person, and then send it, I guess, to Mr. Dupree-Bruno, who will send it out to the board members. And is there a problem? Do we need to take a formal vote on, yeah, this looks good, no, it doesn't look good, or can board members send suggestions back to our attorney if they see something that doesn't look right? I think the reason I want us to maintain the control on this, that way this is our baby here that we're doing. And if we start parceling out little bits and pieces, then we lose track of the whole process, is my opinion. So I'm wondering if that works for the board members. Send it to Mr. Bruno, she sends it out to the board looks at it and either gives her a thumbs up or says, no, I think we should add, and then we can kind of go from there, just doing it online.
Thank you.
Does that
So
work?
may I have a consensus then to allow, and Ms. Vaughn, thank you for stepping up and doing that. That relieves me from a few things, so I appreciate you. Can I please have consensus for Ms. Vaughn to work with HR to get that add together and then have it sent to Mr. Bruno, and then it will be forwarded to us. If there's any corrections, we will then send it to Mr. Bruno, and then we move on and have it sent out.
Thank you. And Chair, could I clarify, do you want HR to then place that ad, or are you placing it somewhere else?
Yes.
Will be HR that is placing that ad. Thank you. And where do you want the resumes to come to? When they come through the HR process, then they would go to Attorney Dupree Bruno?
Board office.
Board office.
They can forward it to all of us.
Thank you.
Is that what
Would they
everybody
forward?
wants?
I'm sorry.
Ms.
Would they
Vaughn?
be forwarding, or wouldn't it come directly to us? Wouldn't that be the address, that it goes directly to board
They send it to,
office? Why not?
Ms. Thomas, if they send it directly to the board office, do all of us get that, or does it come, that comes directly to you and then?
It comes
you forward
directly to
all
the
of us, correct?
secretaries. It comes directly to the board office, the secretaries.
Yeah, it goes to the secretaries, and then they will forward it to us.
Right,
Board.
that's what, okay, I just wanted to be clear that we weren't having it in HR and then they
Nope,
forward, because
nope.
that just adds to the process.
It would go directly, and that would be part of the ad, where it would go, so it
The
would go
address.
directly to our board office, and then they will disseminate it to the members.
Thank you. Are there any other items that need clarification today before we end?
We just need to see what the
Who's going to
next
reach out to the consultant?
meeting. Oh, the consultant
Who
part.
is the consultant?
I'm sorry, Chair, if we could get a consensus around that process, that HR will send will place the advertisement, and then that the resumes will go to the board office rather than through HR. If we could get consensus around that.
That is correct. Consensus, please, for that. Ms. Gittens,
I'm sorry.
consensus, please?
For,
For, focus.
I'm trying.
For HR is going to place the ad, and it's going to go to the
what you
board.
said, yeah,
Yes, what we said
yeah,
before. Thank you.
Thank you.
7-0.
And then there was a question around if Ms. Vaughn is contacting HR, then Ms. Jordan, will you be reaching out to consultants and providing a list to the board?
Okay, do we have a list of consultants yet, so that can happen?
We do have
have a
some that
couple
were
of-
provided by Greater City Schools. There are also some that have been used by other districts in the state, and then there was the list of people that, I'm sorry, I got that backwards. Those were for the permanent search. For the interim search, the list of names that the board members provided today during your discussion, and Ms. Stillwell made note of those, so those will be provided to the board chair.
And I can also reach out to the foundation, some of the members of the foundation too. And then I will make sure that everybody gets that immediately.
Excellent.
Thank you, Marshall.
And then the next,
We need consensus on that, that
oh, do we have consent?
Sarah's doing that?
Thank you. Can I have consensus on
Yeah.
contacting the consultants and bringing all the names back to the board? Thank you. 7-7.
Thank you.
Okay, and then, so, thank you, ladies. This is, see, we're moving along. So the next meeting, and I may need your help, Ms. Thomas, on the dates that we had saved, because we're here on the 27th, right, today, and I'm trying to see where we had. Okay, so the next scheduled meeting that we had a hold on was on the May 4th. when is the next meeting date that we had for this at 9 a.m. to continue the conversation.
Can I, may I ask something?
Okay. Ms. Gittens.
Since we need to move pretty quickly on the superintendent search as well, I mean, the permanent search, I believe we should be starting that process of looking for the consultant, if that's what everyone has decided. And I would volunteer to help bring some names back to present to the board or get it to the board of possibilities for that, so everything's working simultaneously.
Okay, and I would definitely ask that if there is anyone who, as I said, I know I've been receiving some information from different people throughout the state that are sending them forward. So if there's anybody who would have names for national firms to, perhaps they can bring those on the 4th as well.
Well, that's why I'm asking, can we move forward with that? And that's why I said I would volunteer to collect that and get that to the rest of the board so we can be moving. That needs to be happening simultaneously, so
Well, I just
I
want
wouldn't be doing anything with it. I would just be collecting
No.
it and putting it together for everyone.
I appreciate that, and I just think that everybody should be, if there are names of consultants that they have, I think that everybody needs to just bring them forward.
Why could, anyway, that's right.
Ms. Morgan?
Ms. Fisher's hand was up
Oh, I'm
first.
so sorry, Ms. Fisher.
I think, I'm sorry, but I think,
Patrica?
I'm going to go back to how I started the meeting, which is, you know, we can do this Southern style. We're not in a rush to hire a permanent superintendent because we have the luxury of deliberatively and intentionally hiring an interim, and that interim will serve for a 6 to 9 month period of time while we deliberatively and intentionally hire a successor. So I'm not feeling the need to do these things simultaneously. I am brain dead right now. So to throw out names for consultants and firms and all of that, we need to take our time. And we have the luxury of that time.
Thank you. Ms. Fisher?
yeah, and then I would want to have some clarification. Are we doing a national search, a statewide search?
Well, I think that, and thank you for that, because I definitely think that's something that we can have a conversation on as soon as we get this one thing handled. I mean, we could do it right now if we want.
Right, no, I know, but if we're going to be looking at, national consultants versus that, are we going to be looking at the Florida or National School Boards Association? Because they are very adept and their success rate is higher than some of the consultant firms, and they are a lot more affordable. So, I mean, I just think we need to look at those variables and make sure that we're making the right decision and that we're all agreeing on that.
Thank you.
Yes,
That's for the permanent position.
yes, but it's for the long-term position, hopefully.
Just say that I will not agree to use any of the organizations that we are members of and part of. I think it's a conflict of interest, and it may be 6-1, but I will not vote for that.
Thank you. Miss, okay, I think, so is there any other conversations that we need to have right now? Because we already have a time frame of where we're going to be at, and hopefully everybody feels good about where we're at right now. I know because we do need to move forward and make sure that this takes place. And so the next scheduled meeting that we do have, that we had put on hold, as I said, was May 4th. And that should be on everybody's calendar, because I had asked them to just put it on there so that you all would have some kind of sense of where we were going, if we were moving forward, if that's not okay with everybody, but I have it set for May 4th at 9 o'clock. So if that's suitable with everyone, then I'm just going to go real quick around to see if there's any other comments that need to be made before we put on hold until the next time that we meet. Ms. Morgan?
No, I have nothing else to add.
Okay. Ms. Vaughn?
I'm good.
Ms. Vaughn, thank you very much for doing that. Ms. Gittens?
None.
Thank you. Ms. Fisher?
Yes, I would like to thank everyone for coming to consensus so many times and for the effort that they've put into this meeting today. I would like to thank Ms. McClung, Ms. Stillwell, Attorney Bruno, and LaTanya for their help and support through this process, and I'm looking forward to the next meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Ms. Patrica?
Yeah, thank you, guys. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Is that the end of your comments?
That's it. I'm sorry. I usually say, those are my comments.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Giovanelli?
Yes, I'd like to thank everybody that helped today. But, I also thought I'd read an email that we all received from an employee of the district. I think it's kind of important and just for us to circle back around and think about the district. It has been since August 2020 that I have written to you, although I continue to watch board meetings, workshops, and briefings with great interest. As I've indicated in the past correspondence with you, I worked for the district, and as such, I have certain insight and perspective unique to me. I remain anonymous using this name. However, part of me always wonders if one or more of you might know who I am. The fact that I feel I need to remain anonymous, the fact that the district never overcomes these deeply rooted issues using leaders from within, the fact that this board is so divided over how to fix these issues should speak volumes to how deeply rooted and significant these issues are. A few thoughts. I wish Dr. Atkins all the best. Frankly, being an insider, he did not stand a chance to make the type of changes needed. I do believe he tried the best he could on some things. He just failed to make the substantive changes needed organizationally for reasons only he can know. The type of necessary action needed will take a strong, unified board and strong leadership. We have had neither. The issues within the district run deep. They will never be resolved by an insider. Your search for a next superintendent needs to look outward and be extremely thorough. Any insider will owe too many favors. We'll have too many skeletons and will never make the types of changes needed. The next superintendent, while they clearly need experience with education, just as important as they need to have experience with running and leading a successful businesses. Any insider will lack the necessary business skills required to successfully lead an organization of this size and complexity. An interim superintendent needs to be an interim, not be permanent. The next superintendent must be a strong leader, one who should quickly recognize the silos that exist, the power struggles that occur between those silos, which results in what is not best for students and stakeholders, and frankly, what is not best for the superintendent and board. The next superintendent must expect more from and hold accountable those chiefs, managements that are empowered to lead. I would recommend an outside firm to hire to analyze our business and provide a recommendation on an effective organizational structure. What we have now is clearly not working. Human resources must pivot from their current deeply rooted punitive culture to a nurturing, growth-oriented culture. Hire HR. HR cannot be fixed without starting at the top. Academic services must pivot from bowing down to the small, in number, large, in voice group with their foot fully pressed on the gas pedal. Focus more exclusively on providing the basics to educate our youth and lead the social issues education to those rightfully empowered to educate on such issues, the parents. Operations/information services budget must pivot to be in service-oriented divisions. These need to get to a culture of existence because of the customers, management, directors, principals, teachers, students, community stakeholders. The next superintendent needs a full functional board. All of you, particularly those who have served the longest, who certainly had a role in getting us to where we are today, should take a long, honest look at themselves, not acknowledging they have been part of the problem, accept responsibility for that, and move forward in a more appropriate way. Regarding the many meetings since last August, it should not come as a surprise to any of you that words such as embarrassing, dysfunctional, vindictive, unprofessional, self-serving might best describe these meetings. Finally, the world of Lee County will be watching all of you as you navigate through the path. Set your egos, personal vendettas, personal agendas, anything else aside, and as you always say, but rarely do this for the students and govern accordingly. May God bless you as you carry all with you your business. May God bring us the right godly, strong, compassionate person to lead in Lee County. Thank you. And that person is very insightful, and I just appreciate him. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Giovanelli. And are you sure it was a him?
Well, he says, I don't know if it's a him, but I mean, JES is his initials, and his name is John Scott on the, but, so.
Could be pseudonym.
Them, I don't know, them, how's that? Appreciate
No, thank you very much for reading that, and I did read that. And I just would like to thank Ms. McClung and Ms. Stillwell very much for assisting, and always appreciate all of your help. Ms. Thomas, of course, she knows, appreciate her, and Ms. Dupree Bruno, thank you for helping us here today, and just everybody. Ladies, I'm glad that we were able to get together and to have this discussion all together, and I look forward to having much more conversation. And I thank you so much. See you at 6.
Someday I'll buy you a drink. Yes, and Lauren too.
Are you?
I will buy you a drink.